Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Women Serve 2 podcast. Today we have Meghann Trapp with us. She is a 10-year disabled veteran that served as a firefighter, EMT, and an aeromedical evacuation technician for a medvac crew. She has lived all over the world and served all over, including deployments to the Middle East. One of the things that we are going to talk about is because in 2016, while deployed to Kuwait, she was sexually assaulted and it changed everything that she knew. So that's actually going to be the topic for today. She's very involved with sharing her story. She co-authored a book called She Did It, which became an international bestseller in January of 2020. And in March of 2020, she was invited to speak at Fort Sam Houston and San Antonio, Texas, to the Army South Command and for the sexual assault team in efforts to combat sexual assault within the military and the importance of mental health awareness. So she's very involved in the community and sharing her story. So Meghann, thank you so much for being on this podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here and to talk with you and everyone else.
Yes. So I usually have people start kind of telling about their military journey, why they joined, what their service was like, what happened. So let's start off with your military service.
Okay. So I'm from Littleton, Colorado, and I had actually started my journey as a firefighter, a couple years prior to joining the Air Force. And it's a really competitive field to get into, as you can imagine, because it's an awesome job and,
Mhm.
great benefits, of course, that go along with the job and the schedule and everything like that. So I had become a firefighter here. And actually, my ex that I dated was a cadet at the Air Force Academy and had graduated, and we kind of like touched base again. And he was like, "Oh, you should join the Air Force," and I was like, "I don't know." And so
Yeah.
it was just kind of, yeah, it was like I went in and met with the recruiter, and so I was considered older. I mean, I joined at 27 and a half, and at the time the cutoff age for active duty was 28, so I was super close to the cutoff age. But that's why I joined at a later age, because I'd kind of been out living life. And I finally just said, you know what, actually, interestingly enough, my anniversary is today that I joined in 2009. So left for basic and January 27th, flew down to San Antonio, went to Lackland, and that was it. I mean, I really, you kind of, obviously, like, we all know how basic training is. You got to really like learn everything. And it's kind of like, oh my gosh. But I think because, my dad was in the Army and I had been on my own for a while. So it wasn't like as big of a shock for me, I think, as it was compared to like some of the younger girls that were in my flight. But I mean, overall, it was pretty easy. Went to tech school next, which we talked about, was at Goodfellow, and did my academy. Academy was awesome, super tough at the time. It was still insane. The pass rate for females, I think it was like a 95% washout rate. Besides me there, I think there was maybe 4 or 5 other females total out of like 3,000 students. And we're talking, it's a DoD fire academy. So it's Army, Air Force, Marines, and some Navy. Like, it's hardcore. It's very,
Wow.
very tough physically. You got to really, and then mentally, because you have to, I mean, all of it really. You have to know your stuff and be able to test out, test well on your academic,
Mhm.
and then go and do like live burns, hands-on training, drags, carries, like all kinds of stuff. So I was one of the few females that my chief told me that had actually like stayed with my original class and graduated with my class at the time. So it was a
Badass.
big,
Okay.
yeah, thanks. It was exciting. It was a, really honored when you get that badge pinned on at graduation from tech school. And I put in for Aviano was my first choice. So I found out early on I was going to Aviano, Italy. And it was like, yeah, so awesome experience. Got to go overseas and live in Italy, and just, it was, I mean, I got to move off base kind of by a fluke, but it was amazing. I mean, I just immersed myself in the culture, and I shopped off base. I learned the language and I learned about everything while I was there. And I just completely fell in love with Italy and with Europe in general, and just really made the best of my experience. And that's also where, just really learned more about the job and took advantage of everything the Air Force gave me, like going to advanced firefighting courses and, starting to get my fire science degree, and traveled the world. I mean, it was awesome looking back on it. Those are the friends I made there, and just the experiences overall will stick with me for a lifetime. So I truly loved it. I got my military firefighter of the year award from Aviano.
Dang, you're such a badass.
Thank you. It was kind of shocking because I left. I had gotten orders to Shaw of all places. I was like, no, Air Force Base or Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina, and it was just like, you're sending me where? You know? Middle of nowhere, Sumter, South Carolina. Very talk about a culture shock, especially coming from Italy. So I was not super thrilled, but I had just gotten there, and firefighters love to like you have to have really thick skin in the fire department. We all kind of clown on each other and pick on each other. One of my actually Italian firefighters had messaged me on Facebook and was like, "Congratulations on winning firefighter of the year." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, hilarious," because I was like, "That's not even funny to joke about." And I was like,
Yeah.
going off on him, and he was like, "I'm serious," and I'm like, "Whatever." And everybody, I kept getting all these messages. I'm like, "Guys, this isn't funny anymore." And then finally, my old chief from Aviano, his wife reached out to me. She's like, "Congratulations!" And I was like, "Oh, this is real. This is the real deal." Okay, they're not joking. So I was totally shocked. It's a peer nominated award. I guess my supervisor and my team, my shift had put me in for that award, and they announced it, and I had the firefighters ball and in Aviano, where they gave I had this cool bronze statue as like a trophy with my name on it to my supervisor, and they shipped it to South Carolina. So that was definitely one of the huge highlights of my career. Just the honor of getting that type of an award and all the hard work that I'd put in and the sacrifice and everything. So it was, yeah, I really flourished. After being in South Carolina, because I did 4 years, my first contract, and I was just kind of, because I wanted to have the option, and I was like, well, do I want to stay in? And my first sergeant, I was testing for staff. I was testing for staff sergeant. I was senior airman. And he was like, "There's hardly any female NCOs in the fire department. You're an amazing firefighter." Because I had decided I wanted to get out. And he was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I can't. It is tough." Like, there was just, you put up with a lot of extra crap as a female, even me, as tough as I am. I'm like, I want to go back to being a civil, like get on a civilian fire department, but I don't want to leave the military. So I wanted to go guard at the time. And that's how I ended up in the guard. I moved up to North Carolina from South Carolina. I was like 2 hours away in Charlotte, and I reenlisted there. And they didn't have any slots for firefighters at all. So I would have just been kind of sitting around hanging out until something happened or opened up. And I was like, well, I don't want to do that, because that means I can't do anything. Like, I can't train, I can't deploy. I had a really amazing recruiter from that unit, and he talked to me about aerovac, and I was like, because I didn't want to do anything but be a firefighter. And I'm like, what the heck is aerovac? So he's like, go meet the commander. He kind of explained the job. He was like, meet with that squadron and just kind of see what the job's really about. Funny story or fact about me: when I first came into the Air Force, I actually wanted to be a PJ, but at that time they weren't letting any females do any like combat type, special forces. And they were like, no. And I was like, and I even passed the pass test, because I was actually going to do SEER instructor first before I chose firefighter. So I passed like the swim, the run, all that stuff, like with flying colors. And I'm like, dude, why don't you just send me? Like, who cares if I don't pass, I don't pass. I don't want special, circumstances given to me because I'm a female. Like, but of course that was just not the thing at the time. They weren't letting women into the job. So anyway, long story short, when I started hearing about airvac, even though it wasn't PJ, it was really kind of like this exciting, we fly on the back we're in planes, and we medevac out our patients, and we have all kinds of cool deployments and training missions. And it just sounded really awesome. So I was like, hey, all right. And that's how I ended up cross training into airvac. So I had to go through a whole nother year of tech school, because their schools, it's like, well, you have up to phase 3, and then you have like flight school and SEER school, and it's crazy. So it was,
Oh my goodness.
yeah,
Were you
yeah.
a very few female as well in
Well,
that
no,
career
actually,
field?
surprisingly, because it's medical, so it's like heavily, it's complete That's what was funny, coming from the fire department, where I was literally like the only female pretty much everywhere it went. Then going into medical, where it was like all females and like not as many. There was kind of a balance, but it was still heavily dominated female, because the way that our medevac crews work, you have your 2 nurses, which are your officers, and then your med techs, your 3 med techs, and that's your team, your 5-person team who handles the patient. So you're working like hand in hand with officers, which is totally, we don't have any officers in the fire department because of the structure of how the fire department is. Very much like the military. It's like the chain of command. So there's just no place really for officers in a fire department because we're considered like fire officers ourselves. Does that make sense?
Mm.
So it was very different, coming from the fire department into that type of a job where it's like you're, because I mean, you know how it is. Well, I'm sure, but like being enlisted where it's like, you don't really talk to officers, and then going to like, I mean, you're like with these people all the time. So that's like that's like your, same thing as
Like
like
your
how close
core.
yeah, like how close I was with my shift and my crew in the fire department. That's how it was with these guys. And so I met just some amazing people and became really good friends with, of course, a lot of enlisted, but also a lot of officers because they work together so closely in the medical field and specifically in aerovac because it's a much smaller percentage of the medical field, if that makes sense. So we go through tech school with regular med techs, like all Air Force medical technicians. And then I have to go on to like specialty training because I was a flyer. And you go to flight school and SEER school and water survival because that's all part of that job, where they go to like flight med, or they could be in oncology or labor and delivery. So there's med techs that fill those different positions. Mine was this more specialized part of med tech. So it was really cool. I didn't think I would like medical as much as I loved fire because it was just like to my core, it was firefighter. It was everything I did, right? And I did really learn to appreciate the job, and just I think I just have had such a huge fascination for learning about all things medical, and I have no issue seeing like blood and gore and crazy stuff.
Oh yeah,
Like people are
I'm
like,
the
"What?"
complete
And I'm like,
opposite.
oh yeah, cool. Like this is really interesting, because I think about it from like the medical perspective. I'm like, whoa, and people are like, what? So but then again, being a firefighter, you have to be very almost
Mm.
disconnected when you're in that, because you're responding to an emergency. I mean, you're in like a total chaotic environment. So it was just kind of definitely an adrenaline junkie. So
That's awesome though. We need people
yeah.
like you.
And so yeah, then I was in North Carolina for a couple years, and I that's when I fell in love with North Carolina. It's like, wow, what a beautiful place. Um and I didn't want to leave, and I literally felt like I was leaving home. And I moved back home to Colorado, transferred guard units because I just had some family stuff going on at the time, and I'd been gone for so long that I was like, okay, maybe for now it's just time to go home. And a lot of my friends were like, oh, we feel like, we'll see you again. And I was like, yeah, I think I'll be back to North Carolina. So I moved back to Colorado and I transferred guard units. So I left North Carolina Guard and I reenlisted with the Wyoming Guard because Colorado does not have, there's only specific guard units that have airvac with them, if that makes
Mm.
sense. So not every state has them and not every guard unit has it. And Wyoming, Cheyenne was the closest guard aerovac unit. So that's how I ended up in Cheyenne, even though I lived in Colorado. So I would, head up and 117 miles every month to go up there for drill weekend and stay in a hotel and do my training. And then I took a contract job in the Marshall Islands for a year as a firefighter because I got the opportunity to go. And so I approached my commander and was like, listen, I'm never going to be able to do this again, because I had just finished most of my training. And I was like, once I get qualified as a flyer, like you have to stay, up on your flight, like on your hours and flying. I can't do that ever again. Like this is going to be, I have to go now or I'm never going to go. And so her husband was a civilian firefighter, so she got it. She was like, okay, so they approved me to go. They're like, you can take a year off, do all your training before you leave. And that's what I did. And I left in January of 2015, went down to the Marshall Islands for a year and, worked as a contractor, as a firefighter on this teeny tiny little island in literally the middle of nowhere. It was kind of hard because you're on a small island of nothing but contractors and like 8 Army people. And it was like, you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So we're in the first time zone. That tells you how, like, we're ahead of Australia, Japan. Like, we are literally in the very first time zone. So I was 22 hours ahead of my sister who lived in Hawaii, even though I was only 2,000 miles away from her. It was crazy. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was wild. And it was hard. I saw some hard stuff happen there. Some really kind of life-changing situations, and I definitely was like, okay, maybe it's time to go. So I came back home the end of that year, and early 2016, that was when I finally, came back to Colorado, and my unit was like, okay, well, I got pulled back to the fire department after being out for 4 years because they triple tasked the fire department. in Wyoming for the Wyoming Guard. And what that means is we got hit up for 3 deployments, which they pretty much wiped out our whole fire department. Didn't have much to keep people back home, because you have to have your unit, still some people, because most of our Guard firefighters are also state firefighters that work at the base, because Cheyenne Airport is we share that airport to help protect that flight line for the city of Cheyenne. So it was like, okay, well, we can't take all of the firefighters that are also mostly in the Guard, because then that means we have no state people to work on the fire department for Cheyenne Airport. So they came to me because they knew my primary AFSC was fire, and they're like, hey, guess what? We're pulling you back to fire and you're going to go deploy to Kuwait. And I was like, what? So I'm like, okay, like, yes, but I mean, I hadn't been in the career field for 4 years. So it was like, and I had never been in the career field as an NCO, because at that point I was, a staff sergeant. And I'm like, oh my gosh, am I going to remember everything? Like, I wasn't even up to date on anything, because you're part of CE, you're in a whole different squadron. So you have your CE responsibilities for civil engineer, and then you have your firefighter. I mean, it was like scrambling last minute to just get everything done on this deployment. So that's how I ended up going to Kuwait. And I'm like, okay, it's Kuwait. Like, everybody in the Air Force knows it's like, this is a cake deployment. We have a pool on base and a movie theater. Like, it's not Syria or Afghanistan. Like, this is going to be, I'm like, I'm going to get paid. I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to, it's cool. It's going to be easy. I'm going to finish my degree. That was my plan. And I got there and definitely did not go at all to plan. I got involved with this guy, and I knew better from previous deployments. Like, I've never gotten involved with any before in a deployment, just because it's like, what's the point? Because you all end up going home, and usually it doesn't work out. And he completely lied to me about everything. So I found out after, and we were dating casually, not like super serious, but still. He was the one who pretty much like started the whole thing. I mean, he kind of started, we met at the pool, and he started like following me around all the time and just showing up at the fire department. And I was just kind of like, okay, whatever. And I found out through social media that he was married, and he had completely lied to me. Yeah. So I flipped out, because I was like, what? You jeopardized my career, not to mention that you are a scumbag for being married. And it took me confronting him like 4 different times, because he would be like, okay, well, we're divorced. Okay, well, we're separated. Okay, and then finally, oh yeah, we're married. And I was like, okay. So I cut it off.
Took you long enough.
Right. I was like, you don't ever talk to me again, whatever. And that's when things like literally his last weekend there, like, he physically and sexually assaulted me. And it was horrible. They kept me downrange the entire deployment, going through everything. And it didn't make sense to me. I'm like, am I really that important to the mission that you can't send me home? I had been pulled off the truck because I was helping crew on a shift, as, on the tanker crew, which is like, it's the easy, it was like me and another, literally, we're both the same rank. So we would just like trade off, like, do you want to crew or do you want to drive? I mean, we had like a sweet little, thing going, because it was like, oh, okay, we didn't have any airmen to worry about, like, on the truck, it's just us two, right? Then tanker is like, you just kind of roll out. You're not first run, so you're not like having to respond to everything, but it wasn't that difficult. And of course, every firefighter who doesn't want to be on the truck, like, that's your bread and butter. And so I found out that they were putting me on a staff position, like a desk job, and I was furious, because I was like, it's kind of like the unspoken notion that, like, I don't know how to say it without, basically, like, okay, what, do I suck and you're going to put me on a desk? You know what I mean? It's kind of like an insult. Like, what? Why would you put me up? But I also, at the time, that was just my experience from always being like on first run, and being like first run driver or crash truck driver as a younger airman, like, getting those type of opportunities. So for me, it was like, my perception of it was like, wow, I'm being demoted to go sit at a desk. This is not what I joined the fire department or the Air Force to be, whatever. And after getting put in the position and learning from my leadership at the time, they were like, we chose you because we knew you would get the job done. And so I was like, oh, okay. It didn't really help at the time, because it was so stressful. I mean, I was NCOIC, which is NCO in command of logistics. So the entire fire department logistics, like every piece of equipment, everything I was in charge of. And I reported directly to the fire chief. And I was a staff sergeant. So I would go into staff meetings and I'm with like all master sergeants and above. Okay. So I'm like the lowest ranking, the only female. And I'm like, what am I doing here? It was kind of intimidating going, but I had a phenomenal supervisor and deputy and fire chief who realized my potential and knew and, told me and reminded me that, they chose me for a reason. And so that was, I was really blessed to have such a great leadership while I was deployed, because once, of course, everything started happening with the investigation and with my assault, and I came forward and told them, they were nothing but supportive. And I'm still to this day, I stay in contact with them, and they know how grateful I am to them, because had I not had that, I think it would have been even 10 times worse. It was hard enough to go through, especially being on a deployment, because he had gone home, my perpetrator. So he had gone back to his base. And I mean, I was terrified. I didn't come forward until he left, and I made sure he was actually on US soil, because I had heard like, oh, even if because they had gone to like Qatar first and then, like picked up other people on the way and then gone back. And I had just heard stories like, if you come forward, they could bring him back to the AOR and have the whole thing happen there and the court martial. And I was like, and I'm not an easily intimidated person, but I mean, that's how terrified I was of this person. I'm like, he is completely mentally unstable. This guy will kill me. Like, if I do not wait until he's fully, like, I know he's on US soil, like, who knows what I mean, he physically assaulted me in a movie theater in front of a packed, I mean, I had officers sitting behind me and nobody did anything. Nobody did anything. This guy full on grabbed my face, like, just insane crap, right? Like, I'm sitting there going, and I was in such shock, I couldn't even react. I was like frozen in time. Like, I just sat there going in my head, like, is this seriously happening right now? And nobody did anything. So you can imagine him doing something like that. And so, like, he thought the rules didn't apply to him, and he had no boundaries. And it was terrifying. And so once I did come forward and OSI started the investigation and all that stuff. I mean, it was hard. It was because I'm dealing with a very stressful job. So I was NCOIC of logistics and dispatch, 911 dispatch operations center. So I was in charge of all my airmen that ran all the calls. I mean, every emergency, all the things involved in that. So two full-time jobs combined into one, plus going to school and then dealing with my assault. I also had a torn rotator cuff and a broken tailbone. So I had like just a
You were going
plethora.
through it.
Yes. And I definitely was, it was hard, because I look back and I'm like, I was just in such a like fight or flight mode, literally. I mean, towards the end, I had just like flipped out about because I had people, like guys in the fire department had to be interviewed, because, they had witnessed like me and him having this relationship. And like some other NCO was talking crap to one of my airmen about me, like having to be pulled in for an interview. And it was so humiliating. It was like, because they didn't fully know. They knew something was going on, but they didn't know, because obviously, like, I'm not going to share that. But then to have one of my airmen who respects me and looks up to me as her NCO and her, you know, like, I'm setting the example for her, and she's coming up to me and telling me how this other guy in our fire department, who outranked me even, is talking crap about another NCO to an airman. So beyond inappropriate. Like, that is not ever a thing that should even happen. If it would have been other NCOs, I would still been pissed, but it'd been a little bit different. But like, you're an NCO talking about another NCO to an airman, completely inappropriate. And about something he had no idea what was going on. He didn't even know that I'd been assaulted. And to say like, oh, it was just a bunch of I mean, it was like everything that you could imagine times 10, like the weight of just how humiliated I felt. Like, I'm supposed to be this badass, person from my reputation and my background, and like how much I prided myself and took pride in the uniform and the job and being being a firefighter and what that meant. And I was already feeling like just really insecure, because I hadn't been in the career field for 4 years, and I was like, holy crap, like, are people going to judge me, and am I going to remember everything? You know what I mean? Because it was like all these things already going into that deployment, and then having that happen just kind of compounded me just feeling so much like a failure. And then, of course, blaming myself and all the things that victims go through, just I was humiliated. and I was embarrassed and ashamed. Like, how could this happen to me? How could I let this happen? That was the complete thought process. And looking back on that, I just knew like that was, you know, that was just my perception at the time, right? And I was doing the best that I could with the resources I had at that moment. So I had to be, in order to get to where I am now, I had to really learn how to love like hold myself accountable, but also like be very loving and gentle. Like, I can't control anybody. There's no way I could have known that he was going to do that, regardless of what kind of circumstances I was in or what things I allowed or, et cetera, et cetera. Right. And that's been the big takeaway for me because there was just so much more. It got even worse when I came home. And little did I know that that was kind of preparing me for how the next 2 years were going to go. I mean, literally. So I stayed the entire deployment. Yeah, because the deployment or the assault happened October of 2016, and he went home shortly after that because he was on the rotation before me. We came home right at the end of January, like February 1st of 2000. So of course, the first priority was kind of like, it's easier to treat like what you know and what you can take care of. So I was like, okay, I got to get in and get the MRI for my shoulder because they didn't treat any of that in Kuwait. They put me in physical therapy, and I was like, I was a PTL, I was a fitness trainer and a coach. And I'm like, I'm telling you, I have a torn rotator cuff. And the physical therapist, who was an officer, who was like, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't have a degree. And I'm like, okay, I only train people for a living at home. Like, I've only been in the fitness industry for 10 years, but I'm clearly an idiot. She was like, there's no way. There's no way you'd be able to be teaching spin class and doing CrossFit and doing workouts and doing PT with a torn rotator cuff. And I was like, because I was in really good shape. I was like, dude, you obviously don't know me. Like, and talking to my doctors afterwards, they're like, honestly, having been in shape is probably what saved you from being even 10 times worse. Like, it kind of masked my like her, but she also didn't want to swallow her pride and actually listen to what her patient was telling her. Like, I knew my body better than she did. And I was like, I'm telling you, it's a freaking torn rotator cuff. No, there's no way. Okay. So they wasted 6 months and treated me the whole time for nothing, even though I knew. And so when I came home and got the MRI, they're like, yeah, it's a full thickness tear. And I was like, it's bad. It is full all the way through. All three of the 4 muscles that make up the shoulder, I completely tore through them. Yeah. Yeah. So I had to have rotator cuff surgery, and that was like, so it was easier to kind of like focus on that stuff, like, okay, my tailbone was kind of like, whatever, there's nothing we could really do for that. But it was like, okay, focus on the physical. I was on Meghann orders, which in the Guard means you come home and you continue your medical, you continue active duty orders while you're getting, whatever it is for medical continuation. And that kind of helped offset because obviously I couldn't go find a job and work or work in my gym if I had a torn rotator cuff and all these issues. But all this, that's when everything, like, I would say kind of like mid-summer of 2017, towards the end is when everything just like, yeah. So part of, we didn't really address, I was still in therapy because that was part of my, my healing process, right? Like, my orders were for medical stuff. I had to get surgery and then I had to go to physical therapy and all of that. That was much more straightforward because it's like, okay, we know what the problem is. Here, you fix it. When it comes to mental health, like, you're talking about an assault that happened on a deployment. So where do you even start? And I had found out from my case manager, because they're out of Randolph. They're the ones that cut my orders for medical continuation. And they were like, you need to be going to treatment every week or every, whatever you decide, but you need to be in therapy. Like, you were assaulted. And just how all your medical stuff for your shoulder is part of your treatment plan, your mental health and getting therapy is part of your treatment plan. So I was basically like ordered to go because it was kind of like a caveat to my assault. And I'll back up a little bit. So right before that part happened, right actually about the time that I can't remember if it was right before I had surgery or right after, my lawyer. So I was appointed as special victims counsel by the Air Force. That's what happens when you're assaulted. And he had gone home to his unit. He was active duty. And they decided to do a command-directed investigation and not court-martial him. Yeah. So that in itself was like, this is not going to go well. Because my feeling still to this day, had it been a full-on court-martial, he would have been found guilty. He'd have been sent to prison. He'd have been dishonorably discharged and be serving time for what he did. And he should have because of what he did.
For those who are unaware, what is the difference between command directed and court martial?
So huge difference. Court martial is like UCMJ. Everybody knows court martial is like, it's like having a warrant put out for your arrest by a DA. Like they have the charges, they file the charges, they go, and DA says, okay, they say, yep, we have enough, and put out the warrant. You're arrested. You go through the whole trial process. That's the same as like a court martial, but it's all in a military court of law under the UCMJ. Instead, they took that and said, oh, OSI did their investigation. I mean, it was crazy. It was like full on, like I was living in a movie for the couple years that this happened. It was like some stuff that you see in like a John Grisham novel. Like that's how insane my story is. I literally had to be in the room with OSI, and this is in Kuwait, and I called him up. They're in the room listening, recording everything. And I confronted him about my assault, like straight up, so they could have evidence. Like they wanted to hear it. It's like, and he didn't know, of course. It was like all, how like you like a wiretap almost. I mean, that's how crazy it was. It was like, okay, we're gonna call him and you need to confront him. And not like they were like writing down stuff like you need to say this. And I was like, this is crazy.
Oh my
And it
gosh.
was terrifying,
Okay.
but it was like, this guy needs to be held accountable for what he did. Like he's a predator. Because after I came forward and all this stuff started happening, as much as I tried to I wasn't allowed to talk about the case, and nobody else was supposed to either, because it was an ongoing investigation by OSI, which is, anyone that's not Air Force, Office of Special Investigations. And they straight up, same thing as kind of like a gag order, like you are not allowed to talk about investigation. Yet somehow, typical military, especially being on a deployed location, people were finding, I mean, I had young female airmen coming up to me telling me how he had tried to get him to hang out, to go hang out in his room. And this guy was a freaking predator. Just hearing all these different girls coming up to me saying this shit. And I was like, are you serious? I mean, it was so disgusting. It was so disturbing. Anyway, so that all happens. They handed it over to his commander. And I still don't really quite understand you know what I mean? Because I don't know, but to me, it was kind of like, why is that typical? I think they have to give it to the commander, but the commander, in my eyes, his commander is just as guilty as him for what he did, because he's an officer. First of all, he's held to an even higher standard than we are as enlisted, right? That's your job, and you're a freaking you're a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force. You're a commander of an entire squadron. This guy should have been court-martialed. He should have seen that. Him and his JAG should have seen that, handed it over, given him a court-martial. Instead, they chose to leave it with the commander, which is where the command-directed investigation comes in. And his commander 100% protected him. 100%.
How did he protect him?
So, and this is what really pisses me off, because I found out I had guys that were deployed with him from his unit, from his home unit, that reached one in particular, which to this day I have anonymity. I don't ever share names because, I'm not going to do that to them. But reached out to me through Facebook and told me that this person had a UIF. Okay. In the Air Force, that's an unfavorable information file. He had been in so much trouble that they placed. So when you get in trouble in the Air Force, it kind of starts like a verbal LOC. It can be a verbal letter of counseling. It can be an actual written letter. Typically, LOC is written, but sometimes it can be verbal. Usually not. LOC is kind of like the minimal, here's a little piece of paper that you got in trouble for, right? It's like whatever. And then the next step is
slap on the wrist.
Yeah. And then the next step is like an LOR, letter of reprimand, which is like full on. But typically it doesn't quite go anywhere. If it's like a one-time thing, or maybe twice, but typically if it's like minor, it's not going to go into your permanent record. You're not going to get like an article, whatever, like an Article 15 or UCMJ or anything. It's kind of more serious than LOC, but it's like, okay, dude, you're getting a letter of reprimand. You're going to be punished, but it's not going to go on your permanent record if it's minor enough, or if they feel like, okay, this is something that typically this person isn't doing. Anyways, he had this on. So a UIF is a permanent record. So whatever he did was serious enough to have a permanent freaking file created on him, which means And knowing from my experience, because again, I was active duty and I have friends that work in personnel and I know the ins and outs of that stuff. He shouldn't have been able to even freaking deploy with that. Typically, if you have a UIF, you're not allowed to do you're in big trouble. You aren't allowed to deploy, go TDY, go to school, go to advanced courses, use tuition assistance. Typically, you get a demotion with like, depending upon what your punishment is, right? And I had heard from people in his squadron back home that this guy was like, he was a loose cannon. I mean, he would yell like racial slurs. He was completely inappropriate in their shop. And I was like, what? So this guy was already in trouble and they let him freaking deploy. And his words to this person from this commander was, okay, we're letting you deploy. You're already in trouble. Don't do anything stupid. Don't screw up. And what does he do? What does he do? I was so disgusted. Like I can't tell you how angry I was when I found that out. I wanted to like my
I would be
rage,
too.
my rage at that point because I'm like they could have. That's what's insane, and they still protected him. So we go through the process, right? My lawyer's conveying all this stuff to me, right? He's like, okay, um, his command's involved. They've come back and asked like, what do you want to see happen? And I was like, this guy is a predator. He needs to be held accountable. There's supposedly, we all know from day one, zero tolerance policy for freaking sexual anything, assault, harassment, anything. It's a zero tolerance policy. End of story. Okay. We have a beat into our head the minute we step foot in basic training. Don't touch
Very true.
people inappropriately. Don't say inappropriate things. I mean, it's like a kindergartner could learn that better than freaking adults, you know? And so I'm like, why are they, what? And so anyway, they come to me. He's like, they want to know what you want to see. And I was like, he needs to be charged. He needs to be charged with all this. So of course my lawyer does his thing and is going back and forth with his command. And this, I mean, his commander's involved, his shirt, the JAG from his base, of course, because it's a legal thing, right? His wing, I mean, we're talking like all the way up to his wing commander. All are involved in this, okay? Mainly his commander, his squadron commander. So my lawyer comes back and he's like, okay, so they decided to charge him with Article 128, which is physical assault, 134, which is adultery, because he was married and lied about it. And they're not going to charge him with 120, which is sexual assault. And I'm like, they're not even going to charge him with it? Like at all. They just straight up took it off the table. And I just sat, I mean, I literally felt like I'd been slapped in the face.
I literally have no words. Like, you're telling the story, and I'm like,
oh yeah, I know it gets better.
what the fuck?
Meaning more messed up. Yeah, it gets even more. That's what I'm telling you. Like when I tell the details of my story, people are like, what? What?
And
So,
this is why I love when people are transparent, because
this shit is real. People think they're like, no, not in this. I'm like, really? Really? Because this is happening. My case is, mine's unique in its own uniqueness, but it's not like, this is happening everywhere. Trust me. This is not the only story of stuff like this happening. And recently they're like, oh, that happened, a long time ago. No, this is happening, So yeah, they wouldn't even, his commander chose to not even charge him with a sexual assault. And I was just, I mean, I was so disturbed. I was so disgusted at that point with everything involving this. And I was just like, wow. And so then they come back again, almost to add injury to insult. And they're like, okay, well, what would you like to see happen as a punishment? And I kind of laughed when my lawyer called me. I'm like, why do they even care? Like, they didn't even charge him with sexual assault, And it's like, why are you even asking me at this point? You already did what you wanted to do. So what do you need me for? That's pretty much my attitude towards it at that point, because like I said, I was so disgusted with what was happening. And so luckily I knew enough details about this person that I was like, oh, he made tech sergeant for the very last time, because, higher tenure. He tested and he made it and put on. So he was a tech and I was a staff. He was an E6, I was an E5. And I knew that if he got demoted, he would be at higher tenure and they would have to kick him out. And I was like, yes, So I told my lawyer exactly that. I said, I want him demoted. I want him kicked down to an E5. That way he will be forced out under higher tenure. He will not be able to stay in the Air Force. This person does not belong in the Air Force. He is a freaking predator. Truly, like he's a scumbag.
Well, especially if
And
you have a UIF and you get to deploy. Like, they
all
could have
this,
easily
yeah, and it was like,
stopped that.
and then you're married, and like everybody was like, oh yeah, every time he leaves anywhere, he cheats on his wife, and I was like, what is going on with this person? Why is he getting away? You know, it's almost like out in the real world. Like, okay, is he protected? Is he like a CI? Like, what is happening? You know, um, and so I'm like, I tell my lawyer. My lawyer was like, awesome. I'm completely on board. That sounds like a great idea. Okay, I'll call his people and let him know. And so he calls back the next day, and I was kind of worried because that was really quick. Like typically, it's like, you know, typically it was right about a couple days at least before we were kind of hearing back from them. So I was kind of concerned that my lawyer called me literally the next day. And he's like, so Jag called me. And I'm like, okay. And he was like, well, they were going to pass that along to the commander, but he just decided to go ahead and take his own. And I'm like, so why did he even ask me? Like, he didn't even wait to hear back from his Jag. He just decided to move forward with his own determination of what the punishment was seem as fit. And the interesting part is it was like, did they already predict what I was going to, you know what I mean? There's still a lot of things that like, it was because I don't believe there's no such thing as coincidences. Like everything happens for a reason. So who knows what was happening, but I think they kind of predicted that I was going to go that route, given his circumstances. But this was straight up the slime ball move, like complete slime ball move. So his commander chose to go ahead and demote him with a suspension. Means he couldn't get kicked out. He was completely protected from them. So suspension means you're demoted, but we can't kick you out under higher tenure. Yeah. So he completely protected him from being dishonorably forced out under higher tenure.
So was he able to
And
like retest for tech
so
again?
I don't know about that because that was like, he wouldn't have to retest. So here's, at that point, my lawyer even was just like, this is insane. Like, I don't even know what to say. And I said, I want a teleconference with his entire chain of command. And he was like, okay, I'll set it up. So I get the call. Actually, in this part, I remember it was right after surgery because I was in my sling and I'm like kind of still a little doped up. And I was like, yeah, F it, whatever. We're going in, whatever. And so my lawyer calls me and he's like, all right, we're going to be on conference call. It's going to be his commander, his first sergeant, JAG for the wing, the commander, the wing commander, and the command chief master sergeant of the base. And I'm like, okay, so there's like 5 high ranking dudes on the phone, like literally all the chain of command up. And I was like, all right, cool, whatever. And here I am, like a lowly staff sergeant with like officers and all senior enlisted, But I was like, whatever, I don't care. And, so they get on the phone and it's all BS, just his commander's like, well, the reason I chose, this route is because, we chose that as the appropriate, I don't even remember his lingo, right? It was just blah, blah, blah. Because at that point, I had already tuned him out. I'm like, this guy is a piece of crap, just like his freaking airman. And he's like, well, and just so he'll, if he does well within 6 months, he'll get his rank back. I'm like, and then goes on, and I'm like, so you think that that's an appropriate punishment? And he's like, well, he can't use his TA to go to school. He can't go TDY. He can't PCS. He can't go to any advanced courses. He can't do this. He can't do, I'm like, so?
That's only 6 months.
That means nothing to me. That means nothing in the realm of things. And I'm just sitting there like, and he gets done talking. Cause at that point I was just like, F you, dude. Like you are just as bad as him. And then he gets done, talking. And he's like, so, is there anything that you'd like to say? And I was like, yeah. Yeah. And I was like, with all due respect, sir, that is the biggest load of shit I've ever heard in my life. And it was like crickets. Like nobody said anything. And I was like, what would you do if this was your wife or your daughter or another airman in your squadron or whoever? And you're telling me that you think that this is appropriate. And I was like, what? Because he didn't full on rape me? Any unwanted sexual contact is sexual assault. And I said, and that's when I went in, I was like, from day one, we all know that there is a zero tolerance policy. And here you have the chance to do the right damn thing. This guy is a piece of crap. He is a predator. He's a freaking adulterer. He is a scumbag. He physically assaulted me too on top of it. And then you're going to protect him. And you think that this guy is what exudes Air Force core values? Where's his integrity? Where's his service before self? Where's his excellence in all that we do? And you want to stand behind this guy. And I was like, I'm disgusted with every single one of you. And then, no, and I'm, nothing. I mean, it was like you could hear a pin drop in the room. And
well, I was going to say, did he say anything back to that?
Nothing. And my lawyer was just, you could tell he was just like, he was like, all right, thanks, gentlemen. Have a great day. Click. Like, that was it. That was it.
Wow.
And I just sat there and was like, just the amount of rage and fury that I felt. It was like, it's a joke. It's a joke to these people. It is a complete joke what happened and what this guy did to me. And the only reason that he didn't rape me or force himself fully on me in the situation that happened, I had gone to take a shower. So I had gone to my soccer game, and I, at that point, was friends with his roommate. Ended up being one of my main witness in my case as to stuff that he saw happen, because he realized what this person was doing. And he was like, it was so effed up and I couldn't stand by him. That was his roommate and his buddy. And I was really close. I mean, I was telling him everything that was happening as it was play by play, right? And all of his friends. And we were all hanging out because I played soccer with these guys. And this person, my perpetrator, randomly, I mean, he was stalking me on the base. He was interrogating these guys when they would hang out with me. Oh, are you going to date her? Oh, are you going to go hang out there at the fire department? They're like, bro, I mean, he was obsessed with me. They're like, she's just our friend, dude. What the hell? Like, even if we were dating her, like, we're not. But first of all, you're married. Like, what are you worried about?
Yeah. Like, why does it concern you?
I mean, he was psychotic. And so that night he showed up at my soccer game, and they were all leaving the next day. Well, technically it was a Saturday night. They were leaving on a Monday, and I, being, at that time, was still on shift. It was my last shift on the truck. So I had to work on, because we worked 24s, so 24 on, 24 off. So I had to go into work the next day and work on that Sunday. So that was my last night to hang out with his roommate and his friends, because they were all leaving early Monday morning and I wouldn't get to see them before I left and got off duty. So for us, that was kind of like our last night hanging out. But I had played soccer. Most of them played with me. And then we went back to their dorm to hang out in the day room and just do whatever, just hang out on a Saturday night. And he just showed up and started tagging along. And everyone's like, dude, he said he wasn't even going to be here. And that's the same thing he did the night before in the movie theater when he physically assaulted me and said he wasn't going to come. And then he shows up and sits right next to me because his roommate was saving a seat for me. And so when I show up, he's there and his roommate's looking at me like, oh, and I'm like, dude, what? It was crazy. So long story short, he had gone up to go to midnight chow and had left, and we're all hanging out in the day room, and I had my stuff with me. And so I asked his roommate, I was like, dude, can I go shower real quick? Because I was all, wait, I'm sweaty from soccer. And I trusted this person enough because he was, such a good friend to me. And he was like, yeah, it's cool, dude. Like, you have to know the code to their room to get into the dorms there. And I knew that this guy, my perpetrator, was at the chow hall. So I felt safe enough to go and take a shower. I mean, literally it was just going to rinse off and get out. And he was like, yeah, and they had all their stuff packed. So one of the guys was like, oh, I bought an extra towel. Let me go find it. So they hooked me up. They're like, we'll be in the day room. I'm like, cool. So I go and get in the shower, and I'm literally drying off from the shower. And I hear somebody banging on the door and like jiggling the handle to the door. Thank goodness I locked the bathroom door. And I was like, so I thought it was his roommate, because I'm like, there's no bathrooms like anywhere unless you go into a room. I'm like, maybe he needs to wash his hands or maybe he needs to go to the bathroom. And I was expecting to hear him. And I was like, oh, hang on. I'm just finishing getting out of the shower, getting dressed, whatever. And it was the guy that I dated. It was the perpetrator. And immediately when I heard his voice, I'm like, what is he doing here? Like, he's supposed to be a midnight chow. And he's like, hurry up. I got to wash my hands. And he's like jiggling the handle. And I'm like, what the, cornered me in the bathroom, just terrified. And like, I, thinking back on that situation, we're inside that room in the bathroom. Nobody would have been able to hear me. It was almost like he waited on the side of the, you know what I mean? It was almost like
Yeah,
he
it was like
waited.
too convenient.
Yeah, because I'm like, how did he know I was in here and how did he get back here so fast?
Yeah,
And
that's kind of
so
suspicious.
that's what pisses me off is that people think that because, you know what I mean? It's like, so because he didn't actually like penetrate me and rape me, that's okay. Like, that's not sexual assault,
Mhm.
you know? And it's disgusting that that stuff and that's not even, like I said, that's not even talking about the physical assault, all the other crap that he did, like just, you know, the stalking me. I mean, I was talking to a chaplain at the time and he was terrified. He was like, I am highly concerned for your safety. Like, please tell me you're coming forward. And I was like, I'm scared to come forward while he's here. And he was like, well,
Mhm.
I'm here because the chaplain, that was the only one I felt like I could talk to because he's the only one that could keep us in confidence. And luckily, you know, he was supportive and I was like, I'm coming forward the minute he leaves. Like, trust me, it's happening. But I can't, and that's, so that all happens, right? And I'm just still like trying to process it. I am not the same person. I'm just looking back, like a volatile, I mean, my temper, you know, snap. I mean, I was so angry just all the time. I just had all this rage inside of me, which is, you know, it's totally understandable.
Oh,
Um,
1000%.
and I'm trying to maintain all this stuff. I'm still showing up to drill. I'm still doing all this crap. They're forcing me to commute 117 miles one way to go work for the week. That's not even including all my appointments that I go to. So I would typically get them all done because all my doctors and physical, everything was down here in Colorado in Lakewood, right? So I would go to do all that on Mondays and then I'd head up to Cheyenne on a Monday night and I'd stay in the hotel and stay for the week. And I had just bought a new home and I'm like, I'm never even home to even like set up my house. And it was so much crap. And then you know, and it just kind of started where they wanted to extend my orders when I found out in June, and I was like, dude, I can't. This is really adding to my stress. And so I approached my chief and approached my command and was like, hey, you know, they want to extend my orders. Are you guys comfortable with me finishing it at Buckley Air Force Base? Because Buckley's 26 miles from my house. And I was like, and I wasn't asking to leave. I was literally just asking to finish my orders there because it made more sense. Why are you forcing me? Like, you really need me that bad to drive to freaking Cheyenne? Like, I'll still be there on drill weekends. I'll still be doing my duties. Like, nothing would change except I can go work and it made sense to me because I knew that because that was my closest MTF anyway. And that was where my primary care was. And I knew like they were so short manned in the med clinic specifically. And I was like, dude, I can go work on my skills as a med tech and help out in the med clinic, you know, during the week. And I approached their command and the master sergeant, their flight chief, she was like, yeah, we're totally on board because the money would have been coming from Cheyenne anyway. They're already paying astronomical amounts just to put me up in a hotel every week, not to mention the travel per diem. It was like, why are you wasting all this extra money? I'm saving, you know, so I came to him, I'm like, I'm saving you money. I'm still getting my stuff done. I'll still be here for like nothing's changing except I'm reporting to them. And here's the information. I got you know, I gave him the flight chief's name. I gave him her commander's information. I'd done everything. Like I'd done it all. To me, in my mind, that if somebody had approached me and I was their leadership, I would have been like, yeah, let's do what we need to help take care of this person. Cause I told him, I was like, I'm not doing well. Like, this is not helping my mental health. I
Mhm.
am so all over the place. This is just adding undue stress to me. And the group commander at the time, she had been my aerovac commander, the one that approved me to go to the Marshall Islands. So I was like, I know her. She knows me on a personal level. Why wouldn't she approve this? Right. And because my chief, I had approached him first, my fire chief, and he was like, yeah, he's like, put it together and take it to her. And I don't see why not. I don't have an issue with it. And so I went to her and sat down, and my chief and my commander, my squadron commander, happened to, I don't know why they were in the meeting. Something was going on. Anyway, so they had a stand-in lieutenant to like stand in for my commander and then my group commander. And they brought in like the med group chick that was heading my LODs, which I knew something immediately when I went in because I'm like, why are all these extra people here? Like something is suspicious. So I sit down and I tell her everything. I plead my case. And she was like, yeah, I hear all that. And I heard, you know, from everyone else too, kind of the situation. And she's like, but this is your wing, this is your unit, and there's no reason why you can't come here. You're going to stay here. And I was just like, what? Like, I'm telling you, I'm not doing well. This is for me to get better, not just my shoulder, not just all that. Like, I'm
Yeah.
dealing from a freaking sexual assault. I have dedicated my life to the Air Force. And this is the shit that you want to tell me that makes sense. And I was dumbfounded. Again, like another slap in the face. And I'm like, these people don't give a crap about me. They don't. That was the minute when I started, like, it was like something in me just changed. I was like, I can't trust anyone here. I can't trust these people. They don't give a crap about me. They are conniving. And I just felt it in my gut. And I didn't really know until a little bit further down the road till I really started to see just the horrific. And when I say horrific, the stuff that my unit did to me in my eyes and the amount of betrayal to me was almost worse than my actual assault for what they did to me. The level of betrayal, the level of toxic leadership and corrupt, like, just disgusting that these people treat their, and I was like, this is why people commit suicide. This is why members end up taking their lives. This is why horrible things happen because of just disgusting people that are in positions of leadership in the military. And they
Yeah, I
were
was gonna
pissed.
ask
They
you,
were
like,
pissed that I stood up to them when shit started going downhill. Cause I was like, you know me better than that? You think I'm just gonna stand here and let you destroy my life and my career? Cause they're like, when everything, so this was like June, July, right? And I went back to my case managers out of Randolph Air Force Base because they're the ones that were in charge of my orders. And I called my case manager. She was a tech sergeant, and I was in tears. And I was like, am I ordered to stay on these orders? Because they were like, we're gonna put you for another 8 weeks because that's when we had just discussed the whole mental health thing. They're like, you really need to be going to therapy regularly. Like, we need you to get better. You need to get help. Like, you've been through a really horrific situation and this is for you, and that we're going to extend your orders 8 weeks. And so I was like, okay, I get that. Cause there was a little confusion and I didn't understand fully. Like, they're like, your treatment plan for your assault is your mental health. You go to therapy and, you work through it. So they were totally understanding. And these are people, like I said, they're out of Randolph Air Force Base in Texas. So I call up that case manager and I'm like literally about to just have a complete breakdown after what I just went through with my people. And I told her what happened. And I said, I am like numb. Like, I can't believe that they're doing this. Like, I don't understand the purpose of this. And I have done so much for them, and I don't get it. And I was like, there's no reason to keep me commuting up here. This is insane. The amount of money that they're costing and wasting that's fraud, waste, and abuse in my eyes. And so she sat there and she was dumbfounded. She was like, what? They told you what? And all of a sudden I hear this other woman's voice and she starts talking over this tech sergeant. And she's like, hi, Sergeant Trapp. This is Lieutenant Colonel. I can't remember her name now. I have it written down somewhere, but another female. And I'm like, oh, I was like, yes, ma'am. And she's like, I'm the commander of, what we do here in this unit. And she was like, I heard everything. You're on speakerphone. She's like, I just want you to know I'm tech sergeant. My case manager's, she was her boss. And she was furious. She was like, I am so disgusted. I cannot believe that they are doing this to you. And these are complete strangers. These are people that don't know me. Okay. And this lieutenant colonel was like, and I said, well, these orders are voluntary, correct, ma'am? And she was like, yes. I said, I want off of them. I said, I don't care if I don't have money coming in. I'll figure it out. I don't know what to do, but I'll figure it out. It is not worth my mental health and my stability to continue to come up to this place. After what they've shown me, I said, I'm done. And she's like, I don't blame you. She's like, this is what you need to do. She's like, they're not going to tell you this and they're going to try to fight you because that's how, especially guard units, most of them probably don't even freaking know. But she was like, you're going to go in there and you're going to talk to your finance people and you're going to tell them that you're going to file for con leave pay. So convalescent leave, basically, but it's like basically, or no, I'm sorry, not incapacitation pay. And that's basically saying like you are not able to go to work. And she's like, you have a very good case for that because of everything that's going on. You're going to doctor's appointments and mental health appointments and physical therapy and all these things. So you're going to file it. And she's like, if they have any questions, you tell them to call me. You tell them to call me and I will tell them otherwise. And she's like, and if you want for reference, go look up the AFI 6.1.3. And I was like, awesome. Like, I literally was like, okay, this lady, she's pissed and you don't want to mess with her. Like, she knows her stuff, this is her job. And, so I was like, thank you. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, right on. so, so my chief, I'm like, hell yeah. So my chief comes back, my fire chief. And I said, my orders are going to be ending. Oh, no, right. Oh, so you got to hear this part right before this. This is part of the reason too. Right before this, when I had requested this, after this meeting, so remember I told you the medical, she was a senior master sergeant. She was handling all my LODs for guard line of duty determination because, if something happens, you have to put you technically on active duty too, but it's more with the guard because like when you're activated on a deployment, in order to get treatment for something that happens, you have to do that paperwork to protect you. So like, hey, this is evidence this happened, so I can get medical treatment for it or whatever the issue is. Anyway, so she was in charge of all that, and I was having to like turn in all my stuff from physical therapy and everything at all therapy, whatever, had to go to her. So I was kind of like, why is she in the meeting? Well, she comes back and she's in the fire station with my fire chief in his office, and I'm like, she's never, ever, ever in the fire department. And I was like, why is she here? So I go to lunch and my chief's like, hey, when you come back, like come in here, have a seat with me and Sergeant Mikowski. And I'm like, okay. So I come back and I sit down and they're like, so given the circumstances, we're gonna change everything to up here. And you're going to be seen by everybody at FE Warren, which is the active duty Air Force base, literally right across the highway from us in Cheyenne. And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, we're changing everything here. You're going to start going to mental health there. You're going to go to physical therapy there. You're going to change your parent. And I was like, hold on, what? Who the hell do you people think you are? Like, you can't change no. Like, okay, first of all, my surgeon's in Denver, so you can't change that. Like, you can't force a member to change their MTF because you want it. And I knew why. This is when things started to really kind of like early on, little things started to play out where I was like, because they can control things there. They had all the people there that they were in, cahoots with, pulling this crap on members. Clearly they'd been doing this for a long time. And I didn't realize that until later. Like, there's no way that I could have been the first person they started doing this to. These people were so easily, like, they were so comfortable doing this to people. They've been doing this for years to their people, screwing them over, not giving a crap, destroying their lives and their careers. So I'm sitting there and I'm hearing this and they're like, you're going to start reporting up here. You're going to start, everything's going to be up here. And I'm like, okay. So I walk out, I go back and I call back to my case manager and they're like, they can't do that. They can't force you. And I'm like, I know, they think they can. And I was like, whatever. So she leaves and I come back and my chief had left, like his door locked and closed. He'd left for the day. So I call him and I was like, hey, and to me, and like, he started to show his true colors because I started like really kind of going, dude, like all these people are out to get me. And he was like, no one's out to get you. No, I was like, Anyway, so I call my chief and I was like, that's not going to happen. Like, I don't really care that you can't force me to change things to FE Warren. Like, I don't even live here. That's stupid. No one's going to justify that. I don't know why you guys think you can. I mean, I said it respectfully, but I was like, you can't force me to go to FE Warren. Everything's staying at Buckley. My things are staying in place and I'm coming off orders. And he was like, what? And I'm like, yep, my orders are ending. I chose to voluntarily end them because of the situation. And I clearly do not have the support that I need. And I am also filing for in-cap pay. And he was like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I'm filing for in-cap pay. And he was like, I was like, I'm very well aware. I've read the AFI. I know that I'm well within my rights. And I have it clear. It even said in highlighted section, anyone who is a victim of sexual assault can file for in-cap pay. And I was like, right here. I said, if you want to read it, it's, 6.1.3 of the paragraph. And he was like, okay.
This is one of the things that I used to always tell my troops is know your AFIs because people are going to pull shit on you. They think they know everything, completely unrelated. But, I was walking when I was an airman I was walking in PT gear, and there was a lieutenant colonel coming by, and he was in actual like uniform.
Yeah.
He stops us because I was with 2 other airmen, and he was like, "Are you not gonna salute?" And I was like, "Sir, according to the AFI, you do not need to salute in PT gear." And he was like, "You sure about that?" And I was like, "Yep." And I know that's completely different compared to like your situation, but this is why I always tell people it is so important to know your
Mhm.
AFIs, because people, regardless of rank,
Oh yeah,
one,
they'll try to post that all day long.
they may not know it, or they're gonna pull shit thinking that they're right, or no one's
Mhm.
gonna be like trying to, especially if you're higher rank, they're not gonna be, you
Yeah, they're gonna
know,
question me, blah blah blah. Yeah.
yep. And so, yep,
Oh yeah,
it
he started full on. He was just like, okay. And so I had like one day left on my orders, and it was the next day. And everybody was up there because the air show was going on at our base. So, big deal, right? So they had me on dispatch because I was technically on profile and I couldn't be on the trucks. And I was like, okay, whatever, like nothing new. And I come in, and he came in because I was in the dispatch office, whatever. And my chief was like, okay, so I sent you that email and that incap stuff. And I was like, yeah, I saw, like I know. And he's like, well, just so you know, the last person that filed for incap pay, like literally couldn't put pen to paper. And I was like, you clearly haven't read the AFI. And I was like, I'm very well aware of that, sir. Like, I've read the AFI. The AFI states that anyone who's been sexually assaulted or is the victim of sexual assault is covered under incap pay. And I'm going, you think because I look physically healthy that I cannot file for incap pay? Like, that's how stupid these people were. Like, mental health is mental health. You're not going to look at somebody and be like, oh, you look fine. Why are you filing for this? Like, it's mind blowing to me. But this is why the Air Force and the military as a whole and the DoD has such a huge problem with mental health still. This is why. Because of the stigma, because of the way that people look at it, because of the way they handle it, because of everything. Right. And so I'm just like, these SOBs, dude. And I just sat there and I was like, coming from a fat, overweight POS who came to a guard unit as an active duty guy, dude, he came in to work the system to get his retirement. He was a piece of crap, a scumbag. Like, looking back on all of it, this guy was coming in, never doing anything that he should have. This is our fire chief, okay? He was a disgrace. I have never seen a more fat, out of shape fire chief in my life. And yet telling the airman, oh, I know how to work the system to get all the stuff that we can do TDYs for this. And I'm like, and these are low, like brand new airmen to the Air Force. And I'm just sitting there like, just hearing he would never participate. Oh, I'm on a profile. Oh, I had back surgery. Oh, I can't do this. But then you're going to run and jump in your freaking bunker gear and go jump on a call. But you're on a profile, so you don't have to do PT. Half the time, he was never even in uniform. Yeah, he got away with everything because he was a senior master sergeant, he was a chief, and he was a disgrace. And this is the guy coming in trying to tell me, oh, the last guy was in a horrific accident. I don't give two craps about what that guy's situation is. I'm covered just as well as he is. And clearly you're a moron for not even, why would you not want to help your person, your people? Why? What is
I
the point of
never
that?
understand when people don't wanna take care
Yeah.
of.
Especially when we have bent over backwards, like, to do everything for you and for this fire department and for our squadron. I mean, I came home with an Air Force Achievement Medal from that freaking deployment for the work that I did under an assault, mind you. Again, not knowing that my guys had put me in for that award and
Mhm.
got it, got that medal presented to me like a couple months after we came home from deployment. You know what I mean? It was just like,
Yeah.
so this is all happening. I come off the orders. These people know, okay, I've told them what I'm struggling with. And not one person, not one, texted me, called me, emailed me, checked on me. I live 117 miles away. Don't you think that I'm a little bit at high risk for something to happen? Just the abandonment and the isolation that I felt. Like, granted, I could, at that point, that's when that wall it was already up. I was like, I can't trust these people. But no one even bothered to give a damn about me. Like, oh, we should probably check on her.
And they wonder why the suicide rate is so high.
Yep. And that's exactly what I said. I was like, and you wonder why people kill themselves. This is the shit. This is why. And so this is like August of 2017, right? So things are I'm like really struggling. I start reaching out to like veteran organizations, help to like figure out, because I have no idea how I'm going to pay my mortgage, my bills. I just got accepted to nursing school at Regis and gotten a scholarship, but didn't start till January. So I literally had nothing coming in. Like, I'm in panic mode. I had some savings, but by that point, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, okay. So luckily, I found this amazing organization here in Colorado, and these women came and sat down with me and met me. They brought me gift cards. They paid for my gym membership to help, like, because I was in the process of getting back in shape and like healing, my shoulder, and set me up with organizations to help, like, if I needed help with my car, with my mortgage, with, just, it gave me all kinds of, they did more. They were complete strangers, and they did more than anyone in my entire wing did. And I told them, I was like, these people are just, I don't even know how to feel. Like, and I didn't know that it was going to get worse. So it did. So December comes, I go to drill. And by that point, like, I'm not doing well. And I can't remember what I don't want to be there. I don't want to be around those people. And granted, yeah, like, I'm not myself. Well, and I'm sitting there, and I think I had made, like, I'm a very sarcastic person anyway. Like, really, you know what I mean? I'm very snarky and I was just like, yeah, whatever. Like, who wants to do, I was just like throwing out stupid stuff in drill. And all of a sudden I get pulled aside by 3 of my master sergeants, behind closed doors. And they're like, dude, what's going on with you? Like, we're worried about you. Like, are you okay? And I was like, are you guys high? Are you effing high? Like, no, I'm not okay, obviously. And I just lost it. I was like, everything in my life is a mess and no one cares. I don't know how I'm going to pay for anything. I'm starting school. My GI Bill isn't even going to take effect really until February, even though I start school in January because everything's behind. No one here cares. Like, I'm dealing with my assault. I'm dealing with all this stuff. Nobody checks on me. No one has even asked me how I'm doing. And I'm still showing up to freaking drill. I'm going through all this stuff. Nobody cares. And they were like, and at this point, like, I'm literally almost in tears. And I don't ever let it. But I've learned, like, especially in the fire department, like, you don't show your emotion as a female because they'll eat you alive. And these guys were like, whoa, dude. And the deputy, he was like, I'm going to call Jenny Rigg, who is like the department, like the wing. She like handles all the things mental health, right? And I was like, why? Like, I didn't ask you to do that. But he was like, I just think, like, you just really need to, like, let's see what we can do to help this. And I'm like, it's kind of like too little too late. But I was like, okay, fine, whatever. And I didn't want them to call her, but he had already like gone on his phone, and he was like, I called her. So she shows up with like a chaplain's assistant, and they brought another first sergeant because our squadron didn't even have a first sergeant at the time. And this first sergeant she was fire before she got pulled to do first sergeant duties. So that's why they brought her in, because she knew our job well. And she didn't know me really, but because, I hadn't ever really physically personally met her, but they bring her in. And so they're like, okay, what can we do? We sit down, and they bring this Jenny Rigg person. And Jenny, I knew her because she had first been in that meeting with, legal. And like, when I had to first sit down and tell everything that happened coming home from deployment for my line of duty determinations. And really, that was kind of the only time that I met her. But she sits down, and this woman has the audacity to sit across from me and be like, well, when is this going to end? Don't you think this is enough? Maybe it's time to hang up the uniform. And I'm like, and she's a civilian, mind you. She has never served. And I'm like, are you fucking crazy? Are you serious right now? And I was like, and I flipped out on her. I was like, no, this isn't something that you just get over. I was assaulted. sexually assaulted on my deployment. And now I have all this crap happening and no one's like, what do I have to do to scream from the rooftops? Like, people, pull your heads out of your, you know what, like, and I just sat there and she was like, oh, well, that's not what and I was like, no, I'm done. I'm done with this meeting. Like, we're done, you know? And I just kind of like, I was like, she needs to leave. Like, I don't want to talk to her. And so that's when it's like, okay, this is very clear. So January comes and I'm telling my lawyer, my SVC, my Special Victims Counsel, everything. Cause he's not even he's like in Ohio. Okay. So I'm calling him and I'm telling him what's going on. He's like, I'm putting in for an expedited transfer. Like, this is insane. So I put the expedited transfer in January, and I have my victims advocate, who also is a captain. She really, she seemed kind of cool at the beginning because she like had to sit me down and talk to me and stuff, but she like hasn't really done much. Also, come to find out after our first meeting, this is insane when you hear this. My victims advocate, who also she technically has an active duty, it's an AGR position, right? So she's active duty, but had come to our base as an AGR. She had come from Florida. And when I started telling my story and saying my perpetrator's name, she waits till everything is over. They all leave the room. She shuts the door and she was like, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm like shaking right now. And I was like, no, why would I notice? Like, I'm telling my story. The hell, I'm not paying attention to you, you know? And she's like my face went white. And I was like, why? And she was like, I know him. And I'm like, what? And she was like, we kind of were involved in Florida. And I'm like, she had slept with my perpetrator. And she claims that when she found out he was married, she ended it. But she was like, well, I didn't say anything because I was an officer and he was enlisted. And I'm like, but yet they lived in the same neighborhood. And I'm like, no, you probably hooked up with him and you knew he was married. My victim's advocate. And then instead, she should have recused herself at that moment. She should have been like, nope, I can't touch this. She didn't.
Because of conflict of interest.
Twisted my cases. Just all these little things. Also, you want to know what's funny is when I came forward at downrange, my chaplain, the one I told you that I confided in, and I just remembered this, that I forgot to bring this up. He happened to be at Camp John, which is an hour away that day. And I was like, of course, the day I finally decided to come forward, he's not here, right? He was phenomenal. He was an amazing chaplain. Very just like we had really built just a very close bond because, you know, I knew that he really truly was concerned about me and respected my, you know, my privacy and everything. So when I showed up at the chaplain's office, they're like, he's not here. He's at Camp John. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so they're like, well, the head chaplain, who's like a lieutenant colonel, was there. And I didn't really know him, but I was like, okay, well, I need to report this. Like, I've waited too long. He's finally back on US soil, whatever, right? And I trusted because I trusted this other chaplain. I'm like, this guy's a chaplain. He's the head chaplain. Okay. So they take me into his office and he is not, like, I don't have that like warm, inviting feeling at all with him. And I'm kind of like, but I was like, okay, that necessarily, you know, whatever. And so he's like, you know, what can I do for you? Like, I've been told that you want to come forward and report, you know, something. And I was like, yeah. And so I start telling him everything that happened. This guy proceeds to tell me how before becoming an officer and a chaplain, he was security forces. And I'm like, okay. And then he proceeds to tell me and question me and say, well, if you were living your life right by God, this wouldn't have happened to you. And I'm like,
okay,
I'm a Christian. Okay, I was raised. I am LDS. I'm Mormon. Okay, and I'm like, bro, right now is not the time to lecture me on my faith. God is not gonna look friendly upon this guy for sexually assaulting me. I think God's gonna understand. Like, okay, yeah, I was having an inappropriate relationship morally as a Christian, yes, but how dare this is the head chaplain. And I'm like, and I'm sobbing because I'm like, what? I just decided to come forward and you're going to tell me this? I was furious. And so when I told OSI, I first had a female OSI agent and I told her when that happened, I told her the whole story and she stopped and she like slams the door and she's like, I have to remove myself from the case. And I was like, why? She's like, because I already have a complaint against him. And I'm like, what? And she's like, This guy has said stuff like that to me, and I cannot, like, I've already filed an investigation into him, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I had to write an MFR on this freaking chaplain of what he said to me when I first came forward. Like, I'm telling you, like, everything that could happen in my case happens. Like, that happens, and then my victim's assistant or victim's advocate has slept with my perpetrator in a past life when they were stationed in Florida together. Like, you cannot make this up. And she didn't remove herself from the case, though. So I had to, like, full on write, like, what this chaplain ended up getting investigated by, like, the USAFE, like the head chaplain, and removed from his position for what he said to me. Yeah. So fast forward to her, and she says all that. And this girl is who my lawyer calls, who she's supposed to, like, she briefs the TAG, which is the Army Adjutant General of Wyoming, who's like the head of all the Wyoming Military Department. She's supposedly briefing him every week on, like, my case, because that's who needs to know. He's like the highest. You can't go any higher. He's a freaking 3-star general, right? And I'm like, okay, so she's going to go to my wing commander and tell him that we want an expedited transfer from my lawyer. And I'm like, okay. Like, in my eyes, I'm like, what is she actually doing? Because I don't feel like she's done anything. He turns around and denies it. And they start saying they're threatening me with a med board. And I'm like, eval. And I'm like, I'm sorry. What? You can't threaten a member with, you can't do that. Like, who even decided this? None of you are even in a place to med board me or to determine if I'm being med boarded. Then they start threatening my therapist, and they're like, she needs to turn over all her mental health notes. They wanted my entire mental health record turned over. And I'm like, that's a HIPAA violation. That's a HIPAA violation. You do not get my entire mental health record. You get the notes of my progress. But I was seeing a civilian therapist at the time, and she wasn't really quite, she didn't understand the workings of the military, right? So it was like way over her head. She turned around and said all kinds of notes. And to back up a little bit, not that I had anything to hide, but this is the perfect point in case, if anyone's listening to this, and this is the perfect point in case of knowing your rights and knowing why this stuff is so important and needs to be protected, why HIPAA was created in the first place. This is big. So I was at 21, I was drugged and gang raped. Okay. Horrifically. Ended up getting pregnant and having a miscarriage at 21 years old. And that completely, like, traumatized me throughout my entire adulthood. I mean, I was lost for years before even becoming a firefighter. I was just I drank literally to, like, black out almost every night. I had no direction in my life, had no, and that was back during a time, like, let's tell you how old I am, but, 2002, like, they literally sent me home from the hospital. Here you go, with nothing. I had no resources. I had nothing. I didn't even know what to do with myself. I was like, my whole life has just been shattered, and there's nothing. There's no support groups. There's no people. And, like, it was just like, okay, go back to your life. And I snapped. I mean, I really did. And in the sense of, like, I wasn't myself anymore. Like, part of me kind of, like, died that day. And I buried that very, 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 very deep down, because it was like, what do you do? Nobody has a guidebook on how to proceed in life. And because at that time, like I said, we are not aware like we are now. We don't talk about, we didn't at that time, like, nobody talked about that stuff, which is insane, because it really wasn't, I mean, that's only 22 years ago. But yet, like, it was just kind of a, okay, that happened, move on with your life, right? Like, and my perpetrators also were never, Denver PD reopened the case like 3 years later, and then they still were like, oh, we don't have enough evidence to take them to court. I mean, it was insane, the stuff that I went through. And talk about life altering. I mean, I was 21, barely 21 when this happened. I think a month after my 21st birthday. And my friend that was with me literally left me there with these guys. Like, literally had walked in on them raping me and told the police that she didn't see me moving or saying no. So, yeah. And I was there because of her, to protect her, because she was so drunk. She tried to run off with a bunch of random dudes that we didn't know. And I was there like, whoa, what are you doing? You don't know these people. I'm not letting you leave with them alone. So me being the friend that I am, went with her to protect her. So you can imagine, like, for years, the amount, like, stuff was surfacing because I was keeping it so repressed. I never spoke about it. I mean, even majority of my friends and family didn't even know that because it was such a horrific experience. Like, who wants to share that? So that came out in therapy because obviously that triggered all of that when I was assaulted on my deployment. And that was a big part of my healing process. And the minute my unit saw that note, because my therapist, again, she didn't understand anything. She should have just been sending notes like she did well in therapy, you know, like basic notes. She sent all of that stuff. And they saw that and tried to use it against me. And that's when they said, we want her entire mental health record. They said I was emotionally unstable. They said that I was a POS firefighter and NCO, that I sucked at my job, like horrible stuff. This freaking chick violated HIPAA by talking about my case with people that weren't even involved and weren't supposed to be, because that's how a lot of guard units are. People gossip. So this is all happening. Like, all these different things are happening at the same time. There's no med board. They just keep threatening me with the med board. So my commander, what he did was completely illegal. You cannot deny an expedited transfer based on no med board, just a pending, we're threatening you with a med board, which they didn't even have the authority to do in the first place. So that's why I share it is so important for people to know their rights, especially when it comes to mental health. Know your freaking
Yes.
rights. They do not. A commander doesn't even have the right to demand that. So what happened, because this started happening, that's when I really started fighting back. I was like, no, hell no. Nope. And they sent me, so the senior master sergeant from the med group, who had been handling my LODs and kept telling me to turn over my mental health record from my therapist, her boss, okay, a freaking colonel, sends me a letter in the mail threatening me with an admin SEP if I don't turn over my entire record. Yeah, they're threatening to administratively separate me from the Air Force if I don't give them. So you're blackmailing me.
And this is why it's so important to know, like, again, the AFIs, your rights,
Like,
because especially
and
with
I'm
higher
telling you, like,
ranks,
yep. And I'm telling
they're
you,
going to push it.
this stuff was the exact stuff that I feared when I left active duty. Because, you know, you hear this stuff about, especially about Guard and Reserve, the crap that they pull. And I'm like, you guys are so stupid that you think you're smarter than everybody. You made yourselves look incompetent. You are so dumb. Like, who the hell they think they have power over everything. They think they can over their reach. They're like, oh, we can do whatever we want. And you know what? I would go into my family health and, what's it called? What's the Airman Family and Readiness, or Airman Family? Yeah. I would go into her because she was like the one person I could talk to. And I was like, and she was like, you need to keep fighting. And I was like, why me? Like, why? She said, because no one else has it had. Most people just, they look at what you're going through and they're not strong enough to get through. I'm telling you, she'd been there for like decades. And she was like, you think, and I was like, no, I know now, like, there's no way that I could be the first person they've done this to. But why are they so? She's like, because you're standing up to them. You're the first person that they're pissed. Like, how dare you question our authority and stand up to us, because they've gotten away with it for so long. So my lawyer's like, okay, we need to bring the ADC in. So we go to the Area Defense Council. And at that point, that's also when I kind of had been telling my fire chief, when I was like, I don't trust people. He was like, no one's out to get you, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't even feel good about my ADC. I was like, because I couldn't trust anybody. I went through my Facebook and deleted everyone. I wasn't even talking to my guys in the fire department because I'm like, I can't trust any of these freaking people up here. I mean, you want to talk about like ostracized? I definitely ostracized myself, but I had to, because I'm like, I can't trust these people. I don't know what they're going to do. I had filed a congressional, and the headquarters, okay, from the Wyoming Military Department, because they're the ones that handle that, lied to my congressman and said that they never denied my expedited transfer. And my lawyer's like, we have this in writing, dude. Are you serious? And I was like, so now you're going to lie to you're lying to a congressman. You want to lie? Because I filed a congressional here in Colorado. And of course they were like, what the hell is happening to our, constituent? Like, what is going on up there? Completely lied to him. Oh, we never said that. And I was like, really? So my lawyer's like, all right, they just effed themselves over because now it's in writing that they haven't denied that. Now we're going to file. Now we're going to file for the expedited transfer. And you turn around and file whatever you need to. I was like, okay. So I filed an IG complaint. So I filed the IG complaint. The IG complaint goes to headquarters, not to my wing. Okay. So an Army sergeant first class calls me and he's like, we got your IG complaint. And it was for hostile work environment, toxic, all the stuff, everything, right, that I could include. So then this is right about this time. This is like June, summertime of 2018. And he was like, okay, we've determined that it's a toxic workplace. Absolutely. And I was like, finally, something is happening. And so right then my lawyer went and filed for the expedited transfer and they approved it. So they said, okay, here's the deal. We will let you drill in Colorado. And until we get your transfer approved, you're still attached to us, but you can start drilling with the Colorado Guard. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was like, yes, finally, right? So I go meet with the commander from Colorado Guard. I go to CE because, of course, I had to go to fire at that time because I was in fire. They had to take me into a fire squadron unit flight. So I go meet with the CE commander of Colorado Guard, and he was like, I mean, I'm totally transparent. Like, I told him everything that was happening, and he was like, what? He was like, I am so sorry to hear that. And he was like, you know what? We don't even have a position in the fire department. He's like, I don't even care. We'll make one. We will figure it out. Like, welcome to the Colorado Guard. And I was like, okay, thank you. Totally awesome. My commander, this is how insane, again, my unit is. They tell me, okay, so my major, who's my commander, my squadron commander, tells me, a staff sergeant, to go tell a lieutenant colonel, my other commander, my gaining commander, that he needs to contact my commander. And I'm like, what? How? Are you stupid? Like, what? That's so inappropriate. Why is an officer telling a staff sergeant to go tell another officer who outranks him and I both to tell him to contact him so that he can, have confirmation, like to make sure that I'm where I'm supposed to be?
Oh.
But I'm like, that is not how the military works. Like, on what planet does the staff sergeant go tell a lieutenant colonel that a major wants to have, whatever information he needs? Like, are you stupid? And I felt so dumb, but I was like, sir, I apologize. Like, my commander's like hounding me about this. And they're like, we need to have proof that, that she's there. So we know that she's at drill and she's there and blah, 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 blah. And he was like, okay. And he was like, no worries. We'll take care of it. Well, and of course, all this, the investigations going, like the IG complaint, right? So I'm like, okay, finally. And so I get word from my ADC, like, my commander has approved my transfer. They're literally just getting my PHA together, my physical, because, when you do all, your DHAs, the deployment health assessment, because I had my therapy stuff going on, I was kind of like flagged in the system. Like, I had to have more follow-ups. And so, because it had changed, my mental health had gotten better. And also I forgot to add this, holy crap. So when all that stuff, when they were right at the same time I filed the IG complaint and I was in the process of drilling with Colorado Guard, I was smart enough to recognize, like, it was way out of my therapist realm and I was really concerned for things that were happening. So I immediately went to Buckley, because that's my MTF. I went to their behavioral health, their mental health department, and said, this is what's happening. I want to be seen by an active duty psychologist here. Like, I can't go to this therapist. Like, she was only a licensed clinician too. She wasn't like a full on psychologist. And so I started being seen at Buckley. Okay. Little did my unit know. I start seeing, and my psychologist she was so freaking awesome. She had come from the VA. So she was very well versed on, like, how the military operates, how the VA operates, like all of that, Department of Defense. And she was really good at what she did. And I was seeing her weekly. And I was telling her everything that was happening. And she was just like, oh my gosh. So She had deemed me fit for duty. Okay. I was deemed fit for duty. At no point in time had I ever even been on medication. I was going because I was ordered to, but also because I had been assaulted. Like, it's imperative that I'm in therapy. And I was totally upfront about that stuff. It wasn't like I hit, you know what I mean? And that's part of the reason also why I was found fit for duty, because of the circumstances. And I know, like, I've never have been somebody that would hide stuff, especially from my command. That's what was so like upsetting with what the stuff that they were pulling with me, right? It was just like, dude, I'm doing everything by the book and you guys are literally like, you're basically cheating and like just making up your own rules. So she had sent that up to them and she had told them, you don't get her mental health record. Sorry. Because at that point when everything got really heated, she was like, that's and they were like, well, she's up for a med board, and she went off on them, on this sergeant, this our senior master sergeant from med group. She was like, who the hell do you think you do not have the authority to determine if she's fit for duty, or if I'm the one who decides if she gets a med board for her mental health. Like, you're not a mental health provider. And I was like, finally, somebody, and that's why I'm saying, like, people stand up for yourself. You have to be an advocate for yourself, as hard as it may be, because people like them are going to try to do anything they can and try to get away with anything they can. I mean, and what's hilarious to me is I'm sitting there, I'm like, how do they not look at themselves in the mirror and be like, wow, I'm a jackass? Like, how do you not feel stupid about yourself? Do you know how incompetent you look to an active duty base who's sitting there like, are you guys really in the military? Like, do you know what you're freaking doing up there? Because that was me. I'm like, these people are stupid. They're straight up. But it wasn't, I don't even think it wasn't, like, part of it, a huge part was, yeah, they were totally incompetent and they made themselves, they're just mad because I made them look incompetent. They really did it to themselves. But also because I think they were just so arrogant. They've done it so much that they're like, we can do whatever we want. Completely. Like, knowing those people personally, I'm like, these people are like the scum of the scum that think they can do whatever they want. And then they
Well,
look
they
dumb
got away
doing it.
with it for so
Yeah.
long that they
Yeah.
think that they could keep
Yep.
doing it.
Yep. And
And
so
then
they kept hounding her, and she finally had to go to her commander, because she's a civilian. Well, she's contracted, right? She's a civilian psychologist, so she wasn't military, but she had to go to the behavioral health commander of that squadron, get her involved. That commander called up to Wyoming to my unit and told him to back the F off, and was like, I don't know who the hell you people think you are. You do not have the authority here. You're in the med group. Med group. You don't get to determine if she gets med boarded. You don't get to determine if she's even fit for duty. You are not a mental health provider. And that was finally when it was like, okay, right. So that's when all the stuff started, like, things started falling into place with the transfer. And I'm drilling with Colorado. And I'm finally like, breathing a little bit of a sigh of relief. Like, finally, dude, finally people are seeing these scumbags for what they are. And I'm just sitting there like, this is insane. This is crazy. So October comes, and my fire department in particular for Colorado, for the Guard, they only did quarterly drills because it was just easier for them, because you could get all your training done. It's easier that way. And obviously Wyoming does monthly drill. So I'm sitting there and I'm not at drill because obviously we had just had drill in September. We didn't have to come back till November. And, I was in touch with my guys. They were my new gaining unit. They were sending me emails. I had met them all at drill. They were super nice, super friendly. And I'm at home, right? It's October. I'm at home. It's a Saturday morning. And I get up and I check my email, and I have an email from my fire chief. And I think he CC'd my command, anyway, from the guys in Wyoming. And it was like, please fill out this form and send it back. And it was like form 418 or 418. And I was like, what the hell is a form 418? Like, I've been in the military for almost 10 years at this point, and I've never heard of a 418. And I was like, okay. And so that's all it said. It didn't even go into any detail. This is from my fire chief. Okay. So I'm like, what? And so and I thought maybe it was just part of my transfer, part of my pay, whatever. So I read through the form, and it had my PT score wrong, and it had like something out. I can't remember what else was wrong. It was like one other thing. So I emailed the chief back, and I'm like, Chief, my PT score, this is the correct PT score. This is something else. And I said, can I ask what this is for? I have no idea I've never even heard of this form. And I didn't hear back from him right away, but I was like, what is going on? So I call my captain, who is my area defense counsel. And I was like, hey, ma'am, I just got this email from, Chief Calabrew. Like, what is this? And she was like, oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you, things have been so crazy. And I'm like, tell me what? And she was like, a 418 is a bad RE code. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? What is a bad RE code? Bad reenlistment code. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? And she was like, basically, it's like essentially the same as like a dishonorable discharge. And I'm like, what? And like, I'm like flipping out, right? Like I'm screaming at that point at her. And she was like, okay, calm down. First of all, they didn't properly serve you. Like they didn't even do the proper, like I had to be brought up there in person. You can't just email somebody, tell them to check the form. Like that's how stupid these morons were. Secondly, and she was like, trust me, we're going to fight it. Like, this is insane. I'm like, what is happening? And then I start seeing all these other emails from him, like just crazy stuff. Right. And one of my master sergeants from that unit calls me up, and he was one of the only guys that I still like, one of the like maybe 2 or 3 people that I actually still talk to and that I trusted, because he'd never really done anything to me. And he's like, hey, what's going on? And I was like, what's up? And he was like, well, I just wanted to let you know, like, this is what happened over drill. The chief pulled me in, like literally pulled me into his office and said, hey, I need you to be a witness to this. And so of course he was looking at it. He's like, what the hell is this? And he was like, you're really going to do this to Sergeant Drapp? And he was like, yeah, she's not at drill. And he was like everybody, the whole effing fire department knew that I was in freaking Colorado, and was, he was trying to like say that I was AWOL and not at drill. And he was like, well, you know damn well. He's like, well, she didn't tell me that. And he's like looking at the chief like, dude, everybody knows. Like, what do you mean she didn't tell you this? You approved it. The major approved it. Like, that's how insane. So he's the one that started this whole process. He's like, we're going to push this up to the commander for a battery code. So I wouldn't have been able to reenlist. And so that set off a chain of events that was just like, that was it, dude. That was World War III for me. I was like, I was like, you want to play this game? Okay, let's go. So
They're
he's
going through so many lengths just for one person.
That's what I'm like, dude, what is happening? Like, you people are so threatened. Like, you could not just, all I'm asking for is to leave. I don't even want to be here anymore. You couldn't just let me leave. I was literally, my transfer had already, by that time, I had found out that my wing commander had approved my transfer. And my chief and my freaking flight commander or squadron commander had gone behind his back and filed this bad RE code against me. So you have a subordinate going over his boss, filing this crap because you are so pissed off that I'm leaving. Okay. And I'm like, wow. And so my ADC is like, I'm on top of it. Like, they're, just so you know, they're probably going to call you up there in the next couple of days. They're going to order you to come up and they're going to give it to you in person. And I'm like, and she's like, all you have to do is just take it. You don't have to do anything at that point. We can work on our appeal or a rebuttal, whatever. And I was like, are you kidding me? So yeah, sure enough, they ordered me to come back up, drive all the way to Cheyenne, off duty, in uniform. My freaking scumbag fire chief is in, because I show up to the fire department because my chief is the one that called me and told me about it. Normally, somebody from your flight goes with you to meet with the commander. I figured that's my chief's job. I show up, he's in civilian clothes again. And he's like, oh yeah, I have something going on. So you're just going to go meet with Major. And I'm like, so you want me to go by myself to meet with the commander for this? Okay, dude. So I go up to the squadron and I'm like, I do not hide my emotions well at this point. Like, I'm like, F you, F you, F you, F you. And I go up to the, and I have like another NCO that's in there just as a, witness or whatever. And she was in there. So that wasn't just one-on-one. And he presents this BS file. Like, it's like that big. Okay. And he like slides it across the table and he's like telling me all this stuff. And I'm just looking at him and I'm like just staring him down, dude. Because I'm like thinking, you spineless little coward. And I open the file and I'm like, this is what you're saying. That is the reason that you're giving me a battery code that supposedly wasn't at drill. Then tried to say that I didn't make up my makeup drills. And this is funny because I'll tell the details of that later. Again, showing how stupid these people are. The other one was, oh, she owes $63 on her GTC, on her government travel card. That's it. $63. In 10 years, I had never been late, but because of what they did and the after effects of all my financial issues, I couldn't even pay it. But they hadn't even given me my freaking travel voucher. And I was still waiting months later. That's why it wasn't paid. $63 in 10 years. Okay. So I'm like, are you serious? This is what you want to, this is what you're like saying, that I'm such a piece of crap that you want to give me a bad RE code on? And I'm like, okay. He's like, do you have anything? And I was like, nope. And he's like, okay. Thank you for coming up here. And I literally, I didn't even do face it. I didn't do anything. I just walked out of his office. I was like, dude, whatever. I go back home. I call my SVC, my Special Victims Counsel, and I'm telling him, and he was like, these people, they are grasping at straws. They are so mad that, and I was like, I know. And that's when all this, like, the other NCO that called me, and he was like, dude, he's like, I was like, I'm not on board with this. Like, I'm not signing off on this. When my chief, I'm like, so my chief is the one that, he's like, yeah, it was chief that started this whole thing. Because Major doesn't know a damn thing about the fire department. He doesn't know any of that stuff. And I was like, what's funny is him ordering me to go tell this lieutenant colonel to contact him. And they said they still hadn't heard from him. And I was like, yeah, but you knew that I was at drill. It wasn't like, oh, she's AWOL. We don't know where she's at. Are you serious? And so finally, like, I had to call and get them involved, and they called up. And then I get a call back from the ADC, and she's like, well, now the gaining commander, Colorado Guard, said that they're not going to take you. And I'm like, what? Is that it? She's like, no, you can't back out of a transfer. And he admitted to her that when he saw all the email, because I had started CCing him in the emails when all this shit happened, he called up to Wyoming, said he talked to some people, and that's why he made the decision. And so my area defense counsel went off on him. She's like, that's not how this works. You can't back out of a transfer. It's already been approved. And even if it hadn't, like, you don't get to decide that. Not to mention how illegal that is. I'm like, oh yeah. So he called Major and he started trash talking me, which is also illegal, to my gaining commander. But what's weird is he knew that stuff he knew I was having all these issues. I told him that. And then he acts like, oh, I don't want to take this person. So then she had, like, basically started going off on him about the legal ramifications of what he was doing as a commander. And he was like, okay, well, we'll still take her if she wants. So she tells me that. And I was like, no, hell no. You think I want to go drill with these people after what happened? And now he's all like, this is supposed to be a fresh start for me. This is going to be a clean slate. And then now this commander's doing this crap. How is that fair? And I was like, nope, I'll go. I don't even care at this point. I'll go join a freaking reserves unit if I have to. Like, I am not doing this. So that's when I got a reserves recruiter involved and was like, dude, this is what's happening. Everything is crazy. And he looked at my stuff. He's like, dude, just get us a copy of your PHA and everything else. He's like, you already have the other transfer approved. It's just that copy of your PHA is a couple months old and it was set to expire. And I was like, okay. So we were all set to go. And I was like, all right, I'm going to join the reserves then. Screw it. So they order me to come up. But Wyoming orders me to come to drill for November because of all the stuff that was still kind of pending with the battery code. So I have to show back up to drill. So of course I show up to drill and I'm like hanging out in legal with my freaking area defense counsel because there was really nowhere else for me to be. And of course my people are like, what are you doing here? I thought you were about, I was like telling them what happened. I'm like, you're not going to believe. And they were just like, what? And I'm hearing all kinds of stuff too, like about the fire chief. They're like, dude, he sucks. And I'm like, I tried telling you guys this. So I go to drill and I'm hanging out with, my lawyer. And she's like, okay, so we need to file the appeal and you need to get letters of reference from whoever you can, right? So I hit up everybody that I know are going to be like hard hitters to write me letters of recommendation, sorry. And luckily, because of, again, my reputation, my career, the people that I knew, I was like, yep, I know some pretty high ranking people that will absolutely write me a letter of reference, letter of recommendation, no questions asked. So I reached out to my people, right? Even my leadership from my deployment, my old roommate from North Carolina Guard, who was a freaking major at the time. She was a nurse in my old unit, like everybody that I was like, this is going to be a, valuable letter to write this appeal. Because my Oh yeah. So at drill, my wing commander decided to freaking back up the major, my squadron commander, on his decision. And I was like, are you insane? And so that's why I was filing the appeal, because I'm like, nope, no. So I filed the appeal. I get the letters in. And of course, it's after, it's at the tail end of drill weekend. So it had to be determined like after drill, because most of them were all active duty positions and they were there during the week anyway. So I leave that Sunday and I'm just sitting there like, this is insane. This is totally insane. Like, I can't even believe this is happening. But I felt pretty good about it. I was like, all right, things are it's gonna work out, because everything has to, right? So, and I let IG know too. I call him back and I tell him, and he was just like, what? So this is November by this point. The next week, like mid-November, early November, I finally get the call from this area defense counsel, and she was like, so the wing commander denied your appeal and decided to uphold what your squadron commander recommended for the battery code. And I was like, what? Based on what? How is this legal? And she was like, they chose to do that and they can do that. And I was like, wow. And I'm like, so this is it. Like, my career is over. And my contract, okay, my enlistment was literally ending the end of that month. That's what's so, and I was like, holy crap, dude, talk about like getting down to the wire. And I was like, I'm not going out like this. I've fought way too hard. Like, these people are not going to get away with this. So I threw what I like to call my Hail Mary. And I was like, all right, you guys have done some disgusting stuff. Like, you guys have done everything along the way to just be completely despicable. So I called the adjutant general's office. Okay. I'm a staff sergeant calling a 3-star general's office, but he's the boss. Like, he is the head guy right underneath the governor of Wyoming. I tried calling the governor's office. Come to find out, he's just as shady as the rest of them, but like, they wouldn't even take my call. So that's also why I called the adjutant general. I was like, all right. And I knew enough about him being like part of the like, he knew about my case personally, because my victim's advocate, like, he was very passionate. His 2 passions, the most important things to him, were sexual assault awareness and mental health awareness. And I was like, I need to talk to the general. So I call his office, and his secretary was like, okay, well, what do you want to see him for? And she was like, who is this? And I'm like, this is Sergeant Trapp. I'm with the 153rd. I'm from the Air National Guard. He needs to know what the heck is going on over there, because I guarantee you he doesn't know what's happening or the full story. And she was like, okay, what's happening? And I kind of gave her some detail. I said, there's a lot more, but this is what's happening. And I've fought it every step of the way. And what they're doing is so beyond not only unethical, but it's illegal. I need help and I want to see him. And she's like, well, he doesn't have any appointments till like December. And I was like, because my contract ended November 28th. I'm like, ma'am, I need to get in to see him. And I was like, okay, put me down for December, but please, like, put me on the list. Even if it's like, I will drive to Cheyenne, even if it's for 15 minutes to meet with him, I don't care. Even if it's in between, whatever. I said, put me on like a list, like a cancellation. And she was like, okay, I'll let him know. And I said, okay. And I was ordered to come back up to out process on November 16th, up to my base. So I go up there, I'm in uniform, I report to my area defense counsel. And I, at the same time, had contacted a civilian attorney by the name of Greg Rinke. Okay. Greg Rinke is a very, very, very well-known attorney. He used to be an Army. He was JAG for the Army before he retired. So he knows very well how things work. You say his name within the National Guard Bureau, like that handles all the National Guard, and they freak out because he goes up against, like, he's filed lawsuits against them. He's got like 10 law firms across the United States, I think. And I was given his number by somebody that very like knew. She was like, you contact this person and you say his name, they're going to freak out if you retain him. So I called his office. I already had the phone consult scheduled because it was after all, right when I heard the appeal was denied and everything. And I had to pay like $120 for a phone consult. Well, I'm up that day at the 16th. I'm up out processing. It's like first thing in the morning. And we had our appointment scheduled for that morning on the phone. And I get the call and it's Greg Rinke, who actually called me himself. And I'm like, oh, okay. And my friend later told me when I was telling her, she was like, Greg called you? As in Greg Rinke, as in Tully Rinke? Like he owns the firms? And I'm like, yeah, why? She's like, do you understand how big this guy is? Like how many law firms he has, how many employees he has? That's like a paralegal's job to call you with the phone console. And he himself called you. And I was like, yeah. She's like, that says something. Like he obviously understands how serious, like how big of a deal your case is. And I was like, okay, well, that's good. So anyway, I'm on the phone with him and I start telling him what happened. And he was like, well, what's your RE code? I'm like, they haven't even told me, sir. Like, I don't even know what my RE code is. And he was like, well, is your area defense counsel there? And I was like, yeah, I'm in her office. Like, I'm supposed to be out processing and I'm basically reporting to her right now. He's like, can I talk to her? And I'm like, yeah. So I walk in and I was like, ma'am, she's the captain, right? I'm like, ma'am, this is my attorney, Greg Ranke, on the phone. And she was like, okay. And I hand her my phone and I sit down across from her. Okay. So I'm like sitting across the desk from her. She's on my phone. She's not looking at me. Like she's looking down the whole time she's on the phone. And I could hear everything he's saying to her. And he was like, so what's her RE code? Like, and I can't remember. I think she said like a 2 or a 3. I don't even know. Some number. I don't know what they mean. And he's like, okay. He's like, so what's her background? And she's like, her background? And he's like, yeah, what's her history? And I'm like, I'm smirking because I'm like, he's going to laugh. This is great. Yeah, let's hear it. And she was like, nothing. And he was like, what? What do you mean nothing? And she was like, nothing. He's like, her background's nothing. And she was like, yeah. He's like, she doesn't have an Article 15 or a DUI or any other articles or UCMJs and she was like, no. And I'm like, right? Like, yeah, this is comical. I'm supposedly such a terrible person, but I have nothing in 10 years. Nothing on file. Not even an email of a verbal counseling. Like, seriously? And he just sat there and it's like, you hear silence. And I'm like, I'm laughing to myself because I'm like, yeah, if this wasn't so messed up, it's freaking comical. And he's like, okay. He's like, so, what's going on here? And she's like, do you think that this is, I can't remember like his exact wording. He's like, do you feel like this is retaliation? Oh yeah. He's like, do you feel like this is retaliation against Sergeant Trapp? And she was like, no, I think it's just a misunderstanding. And I'm like, I knew it. I freaking knew it, dude. I knew I could not trust this woman. Like, this is my area defense counsel. What? You think that it's a miscommunication between us? Are you serious? And I'm like shooting daggers into her head because she won't even look at me. She didn't have the balls to look at me. So he's like, okay. And he's like, so what's your position? May I ask, like, what's your position there? And she's like, well, I'm the area defense counsel. Dude, hold on to this because you are going to flip out when I tell you, like, the next part. I literally, because I didn't find out right till at that moment. I wanted to jump up and like punch her in the face. And she was like, oh, well, I'm the new JAG. And I was like, what? 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 How are you the JAG and the area defense counsel? How? You can't be a prosecutor and a freaking defense attorney. That's what that is. So you're going to defend me as the area defense counsel, but you're telling me that you have not enough non-biased. You're working for the base as the JAG, as the prosecutor. And she never told me that. She's like, well, I just got appointed as the new JAG, but all the older cases, like Sergeant Trapp's, I'm still the ADC on. And I'm like, dude, this is so illegal. That's so freaking beyond conflict of interest. There's no way that can happen. And I just sat there and I'm like, I knew it. I knew it. Another freaking person, another puzzle, another link in the freaking toxicity of the chain. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And I was like, that's why she's not like this freaking two-faced, just like all the rest of them. And I was like, all right, I knew it. I was right. And he was like, okay, ma'am, well, thank you for your time. And she hands the phone back to me, right? So I take the phone, I go in the office, I shut the door. He's like, dude, this is beyond, like, this is one of the worst retaliation cases I've ever seen. This is insane. This is crazy. And I was like, I know. I tell people that all the time. Like, nobody believes me until they hear it. It's crazy. And so, as you know, I tell him, he's like, well, we need a $5,000 retainer. And I'm like, okay, because I have $5,000 where, like, and it was frustrating because I'm like, if my case is that good, why do you need, like, why why don't we do
Like
file
a
a
pro bono.
lawsuit? Yeah, or a pro bono. Yeah, like file the lawsuit and then win the money and get the settlement. Like that's how most lawyers are, or whatever. But so I was just like, well, I don't have them. I'll have to figure that out later, but I'll keep you posted. So I'm ready to leave. Like it's almost the end of the day. I'm out processing. I come back from lunch. She texts me because I was downstairs doing medical out processing, and she's like, "Hey, we need to be in Colonel office at 14:30," and that's my wing commander. And I'm like, okay, why? And I was like, do I need to out process him? Like he's the wing commander. She's like, show up in my office and we'll report together. So I go to her office and she's like, okay, remember your facing movements and do. And I'm like, are you dumb? I've been in the military probably longer than you have. Like, just because you think I'm stupid? Like, I've been in 10 years. You think I don't know how to properly report to my wing commanders? And I'm like, okay, idiot, you know? And so we go to his office and we sit down and he starts berating me. And I'm like, I'm totally lost. I'm like, am I missing something? You trying to give me more paperwork? Because that's literally how I'm like, what is going on right now? What is this even? I didn't even know what the meeting was for. Nobody told me anything. So, you know, he's like, sometimes things aren't even about you. Sometimes it's bigger than you and it's about the mission and it's about the wing and you know, just going off. And I was like, what is happening right now? He gets done talking and he's like, so we're going to go ahead and accept your appeal. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the general chewed his ass out. And now he has to accept my appeal. And then you bring me in here and treat me like that. And you're mad. So you act like I'm in trouble again because you got chewed out by the freaking adjutant general. Like maybe you shouldn't have been such a scum piece of crap. And I was like, wow. So he's like, well, we're going to accept your appeal. So you'll be good to go. You can, you know, reenlist wherever. And I'm like, okay. And then he's like, do you have anything to say? And I was like, yeah, sir, I do. And I was like, this should have never happened. This should have never gotten to this point. The ADC cuts me off. Well, thank you so much for your time, sir. Thank you so much for this. And we really, and I'm like, what? And I was just like, okay, whatever. Just give me the pen. I'm going to sign this crap so I can get the hell out of this place. And he's like, and just so you know, this means that you can never come back to this wing. And I almost fell off my chair. Like, are you guys seriously that delusional? Why would anyone want to get into this wing? What?
Yeah, I'll gladly take you up on that.
Oh yeah, dude, because I'm going to come re-enlist here. Because that's totally makes sense. And I was just like, oh my gosh. So I sign it. I go to her office and she starts, you must have a ray of sunshine following you around. I've never seen him ever reverse. And I'm like, maybe because what they did was illegal. And I wanted to I was like, dude, not worth it. Not worth it. Because I can't get in trouble now that, you know, like, whatever. Just, okay, bye. She's like, and just wanted to reiterate, you can't ever reenlist here. And I laughed. I'm like, yeah, thanks. I'm good. And like, dude, got my crap. I left. I was so overjoyed. I was like, oh my gosh, I am finally free of these people. I call my friends. I'm like, I won. It's over. You know, and I'm like, I need my PHA signed. And they're like, well, there's no, you know, I called this other sergeant in medical and she's like, well, there's no flight docs here until drill. And drill was December 1st. And I was like, I used to be in that squadron. There are like 10 at least freaking flight docs and regular physicians in our guard unit that live in Cheyenne. And you're telling me they can't get their butt over for 5 minutes to sign off my PHA. And I was like, that's a bunch of crap. So I'm calling them every freaking day. And they're like, oh yeah, we'll get back to you. Oh, so they knew what they were doing. My contract ends and I'm like freaking out. I'm like, dude, what the hell? So, you know, because I'm like telling my reserves recruiter, I'm like, I've tried to do everything I can there. So another month goes by and I'm like hounding them. I call back to the adjutant general's office. I'm like, now they're not even doing my PHA. Like, I need that in order to reenlist. So they call me up randomly and they're like, hey, come up here. I drive up. I'm not in the military at this point. Okay. So I did this on my own dime, on my own time. I drove 117 miles. I meet with the flight doc because he has to go over my shoulder and my, you know, mental health stuff for my assault, because that's like part of the questions. This freaking douche, another colonel, has the nerve to tell me I have to tell him my entire assault story. And I was like, what? Why? And he's like, because. And I was like, you don't get to determine. I've already been deemed fit for duty by a psychologist. You are not a mental health provider. How many times do we have to go over this? But I was like, dude, fine, whatever. So I started telling him. And he's like, well, why were you in his room? And I'm like, what? Seriously? And I was like, it doesn't matter why I was in his room. That doesn't give anybody permission to put their freaking hands on somebody. And he was like, oh, no, that's not what I'm saying. And I was like, yeah, okay. And so he was like, all right, well, everything looks good. We'll get this process. And I was like, so this is January of 2019. Okay. Another month goes by. Where the hell is my PHA? Like, I'm hounding these people. Finally, in March, my recruiter calls me. And he's like, we finally got your stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay, great. And he was like, yeah, well, they gave you twos. And I was like, what's a two? What? What's a two? What do you mean you gave me twos? And he was like, your mental health and your shoulder. Twos mean like you can't reenlist. You're like, you can't ever be a flyer. You definitely can't get into the fire department. I was like, are you what? And he was like, and you're already rated from the VA, because I had some idiot from my fire department tell me to go file for a disability, because he was like, oh yeah, you can still be in the guard and get your disability from VA. You just have to waive your drill pay. He's like, if obviously if your disability is less than your drill pay, you would waive your disability, and just because you can't double dip, right? Because it's government money. So I had made that mistake of filing, even though knowing I was still staying in. So I was already rated at 60%. And because of that, he's like, they're like, no, flight doc, you're out now. And I was like, yeah, but I was in with 60%. He's like, you were in, you're already in. I'm like, so now because my contract has ended, you're telling me no flight doc in the Air Force is going to sign off. Especially like, and at that point, it was like, that was it. I had been so deflated. And I'm like, I fought this hard, and that's how they got me out, was this crap. They pulled this crap to make sure that I never could come back in again. They knew that if I hit that contract ending, that I was screwed, especially giving me twos, which that flight doc had no, like, I totally could have fought it. And at that point, I just, you know what I mean? I was so exhausted from fighting for over 2 years for this stuff. I mean, I was so done. And I mean, within like the month, I had literally just given up. I mean, I wanted to die every single day. I couldn't get out of bed. I stopped going to school, and I was totally in denial about my mental health, because I was like, well, I'm not one of those veterans that's like planning out my suicide. I'm not like, oh, I'm going to go take a gun and, shoot myself, or I'm going to hang myself, or I'm going to, like, I didn't have any of those steps, but I had one foot on the ledge. Like, I literally did not want, every single day I was like, God, just please come take me off the earth. I can't live like this anymore, because of the amount of grief and pain and anguish. And I was like, I don't want to live anymore. Like, I don't. And it was scary looking back on that, because I was still pretty in denial about it. Like, well, I'm not that bad, but I had nobody. I mean, I felt so isolated, and I would just lay in bed all day long. And I was like, I can't get out of bed. Like, it's over. And right around that time, because of my online, my Deadlift Diva, my fitness business, I had gone on like to Bali and all these awesome masterminds and like Tony Robbins events, and had started reading Tony Robbins' book when I was deployed. During that deployment, that really kind of set that path. I think if that stuff hadn't been in place, it would have been a whole lot different for me, because I'd already kind of made those connections. And this one girl in particular was a social worker from Nova Scotia. And so she and I connected really well through this, owning our own businesses and being an online entrepreneur. And she reached out to me because she had been here in Colorado for this master, like a course, NLP. And she was like, dude, I know, like, you need this. Like, you need to talk to this guy. I'm going to connect you with this guy that I took this course from. And I was like, okay. Cause I was like, dude, there's nothing that can help me. Like, nothing at this point is going to ever change me. Like, I'm a lost cause. I really said that to myself every single day, because I did think that. I was like, nothing can help me get past this. And so I reached out to him. I was totally skeptical. I'm like, yeah. And he was like, I absolutely can help you. I want you to come up to Boulder and come to this course. It starts. And I had just gotten settlement money from a car accident. And I was like, okay, well, I have the money. I mean, I guess nothing else is going to work. This isn't really going to work, but what do I have to lose? And so I went to that course. That was my practitioner. My neurolinguistic programming is what NLP stands for. And it completely changed my life. I mean, I literally had the most insane transformation. I mean, shift, because it changed my perspective. It changes the way that you view the world. And it's through hypnosis and timeline therapy that you go through. And like, I did it because I knew that I wouldn't be able to run my business without having some sort of change in my life. Like, I truly had no idea that it would put me on the path that I'm on now. Like, if you would have told me, oh, I'm going to go on to, start sharing my story publicly and speaking on military bases and writing a book, and because I had first been approached about, like, when I first came home, like, oh, you should really share your story. And I was like, take it. You're like, no, get the heck. Like, I was angry because I was so in my trauma, right? I was like, I'm not going to be the poster child for the freaking Air Force sexual, like, I was like, get away from me. So it's funny though, that is exactly where I mean, like I said, it's just, it's insane to look back on that and be like, wow, what would have happened had I not been exposed to that and been introduced to that and gone through that? And that is what led to me, just really finding my passion for I after I went through that course, it was a 10-day course. So 10 days. Yeah, I just decided, I got to tell my story. Most people didn't even know the details, like my family, nobody. And I just did a Facebook Live one night. I was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go live and I'm going to share it. And I'm going to tell a little bit of what happened. And I did that. And I had so many people privately messaging me and reaching out and being like, oh my gosh, you need to keep sharing your story. This is powerful. This is amazing. I had men even, like, I was surprised at the amount of men reaching out to me and saying, this happened to me when I was in the military. And it was like, you hear about that stuff and you kind of know that, but really until you see that like firsthand, I was like, wow, okay, I'm onto something. And so later that fall, that's when I just started reaching out to military bases. I called Fort Sam because I had been there for my med tech training, and I called their SARC unit and I said, this is my story, I want to share it. And they were like, what? Like, we never get survivors that want to come forward and share this. Holy crap. And I was like, yeah, I know, that's why I need to share it. And so they invited me down the following March. They came down and spoke to them and shared my story with the Army South Command, and just had an amazing feedback from them, very well received. I had other stuff planned, but of course COVID happened. So started doing more podcast interviews. And I mean, I know that it's going to gain more momentum the more I share it, but really just that's what happened. It just kind of like clicked for me. And, I tell people all the time, I'm like, this and what I've been through, it doesn't mean that I'm like, it's just magically gone, right? I mean, I have PTSD. I have to live with that. I have PTSD, MST. That is what my rating is. I'm 100% rated. But I'm very transparent about that. And I own that because it's like, you can still, regain. I think the big part for survivors is taking back and empowering yourself. You don't have to live to that victimhood and that label. And I say victim because I try to connect with other survivors and other victims, but I also realized even the language that I was using, like calling myself a victim, I say it in the right meanings and the purposes, but the more that you say that, you really start to take on that identity. I mean, people kept saying, oh, you're a victim, you're a victim, you're a victim. And it was like, you know what, though, I'm a survivor because I survived it. And now I want to be at the point where I'm thriving, not just surviving life. And that's the biggest thing that I like to tell people and share with people. You don't have to live, and it's okay if you've never shared your story or you've never come forward. I mean, I never got justice in any of my things, and just knowing that I get to decide what I want out of my life and I get to take control. I mean, the biggest empowerment I have now is I'm here sharing the story. None of those people can do anything to me about it. They can't say anything. They can't do anything about my story and me sharing this publicly. And that is a huge empowerment for me because I'm like, they can't, what are they going to do? They can't
What,
say
kick you
anything.
out?
Right. And some point, I mean, I truly see down in the future, like not only sharing this on a huge platform in front of a lot of people, but working to change the way that, working on the level with Congress and getting the way that mental health and sexual assault is handled within the DoD. We have come a little bit further. There's still a ton of work to do, but the big thing about my case, I don't know if you remember in 2020, President Trump signed into law, they took away complete power from commander. So you can no longer do, when it comes to rape, murder, and I can't remember the other ones, but you no longer can even go the route of a command directed investigation. It's completely out of their hands when it comes to those. And I'm like, finally, finally, because that's exactly what happened in my case. Perfect example of why it should not even have been a thing. Because I mean, you're talking about serious offenses, it needs to be handled in a court martial, not by your commander, because of course they're going to try to protect their people.
It's
You would
subjective.
hope that they would do the right thing, but clearly, and so that's where we're at now. Like I, and of course I have big plans. Like I see big dreams of, sharing, even like going and hitting up colleges and speaking at colleges, because you look at like how many issues with young kids where they're being raped, and, major issues on campuses, and even at the high school level. I'm very passionate about just telling people, empowering them to be aware and to stand up for themselves, and let them know, like, this, we are lucky to be in a time where we can speak about this stuff and not be like, yeah, there's still a lot of stigma around it and things like that, but this is a big deal where, yeah, we can do what we're doing right now and share it publicly, and people are getting so much better about having those tough conversations and realizing, because not only, like, yes, this is sexual assault mainly, heavily, but it ties in absolutely with mental health awareness. I mean, it's huge, you know? So I know I've talked your ear off.
No, I mean, like you said, I don't think people, I don't think you can make this shit up, right? Like, this story just kept it,
Yeah.
like, it was just like one detail after the other that just kept being fucking mind blowing. But like, I'm like,
Yeah, it is. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I tell people, and they're just like, what? Like, there
but
is no other way to react to it. Yeah. What?
yeah, and, I think, you made a comment where, one of those people along the way that said, a lot of people get defeated, so they don't try to stand up for themselves.
Mhm.
And, it can go down that road of, depression and suicide. And there is a lot of trauma, and there is trauma, like, regardless of what trauma you have, like, you have to work through that to get out of those, periods. And, not to say it was a good thing that out of all the people it happened to you, because you're a very strong, independent woman, but it needed to be highlighted, and it needed to be, talked about, because this does happen all the fucking time, and
Yeah.
people don't believe it because, sometimes
It
I
is.
even,
It's on. Yeah, it is. It's more unbelievable than it is believable. It is. It's like, no way. No way.
but, like, I mean, even to this day, sometimes people, gaslight the situation, and they're like, well,
Yep.
like, was the woman asking for it?
Yeah.
Or,
It
like,
is. It is
how,
so disturbing to see. It makes me. It makes my blood boil when I see, especially like when these poor girls that, like, have, it's totally, my heart breaks for them, because, like, I know how hard it is only to deal with that just as it is, but then to have it, like, fully publicized. Like, these girls in high schools and colleges that are like, they videotaped it. These stupid young boys that videotaped these
mm,
girls being raped or being unconsciously drunk, and it's disgusting. And then the comments that people, it's like, oh, well, she went to a party and drank with guys. What did she think? And it's like, well, this is exactly why we are still here. You
mhm,
blame the victim. What was she wearing? What was she doing? Why were you there? Why are we not teaching our boys to stop putting their freaking hands on people and teaching them to have respect for themselves? And hey, like, that's why when I was still, early on, even in Italy, it was, they finally started recognizing, okay, if you're drinking, you cannot give consent. So you're drinking, just stay, which, okay, obviously how many people follow that, but that's a whole nother thing. It's like, but at least they recognize, like, you should not be doing this when you're drunk, because nobody can give consent because you're intoxicated. You're not in the right state of mind. And that, again, that's why I see that importance of talking to younger people, especially in high school and colleges, because I mean, we're all that way. I mean, not maybe everybody, but we were, I know how young and careless I was. And it's like, you don't think about that stuff. You don't think that can ever happen to you. You're like, oh, I'm just being young and silly and being a teenager and being stupid and drinking and, like, dumb stuff
mhm,
that we all did when we were young, and we're invincible. Nothing
yep,
can happen to me. I mean, look what happened to me at 21. I didn't think that
yeah,
was going to happen. and it completely shattered my my how I viewed myself and my esteem and it affected everything. I mean, for years I haven't been able to have a healthy, normal relationship with a man because that's the thing that suffered. And now here I am as a single mom. And I'm like, I want my daughter to know that no matter what, like, it doesn't matter anything that she's done. She will always be supported by me, and that she does matter, and to teach her resiliency, but also to give her the tools to understand and to recognize that, unfortunately, yeah, you have to be very careful about the situations you put yourself in, but also know, like, it's such a different, you know what I mean? Now, especially because of what I've been through, I want to empower her so that she is
Mhm.
happy and thriving, and pray that that doesn't happen to her. And that if it does, that, she's got me in her corner. But yeah, I mean, it is, it kind of made me laugh when all this stuff was happening with them. Cause I was like, do you not know who I am? Do you think, like, even in the toughest moments where I did want to give up, it was like, why do I have to be that person? But if not me, then who? You know,
Yeah. That's what I'm
because
saying. Like, it was almost like, you know, God gave you this purpose to hopefully, stop it. And I know
yeah,
stop is going to be a while,
we
but
have a
to,
lot of work to do, but yeah.
yeah, but
No,
like
I
to
totally agree.
recognize
Cause it's
it
like,
and acknowledge it.
yeah, yep. And I have said that a few times where it's like, no, would I ever in my wildest dreams wishes on anyone.
Yeah.
And it's sad that I had to go through that. But at the same time, what I've found now, had I not had that happen, you know what I mean? What I found my next passion and purpose of really, like, standing in my power, and yeah, and it's okay. Like, I am very open about that stuff, to let other victims and survivors know, my life, I still live with that every day. I have my bad days. I have my days where I
Mhm.
do, I'm human. You think about
Yeah,
that, and the feelings and the
1,000%.
emotions get to you, and it's hard. It's like, how that the amount of pain, but I also know that I'm not stuck in that place permanently, like I did feel when I was, like, really truly, when I'd kind of hit rock bottom, and that I know that there is a way to go from there. There's ways to go up. There's people, like, I know who I can reach out to and talk to, and I'm not stuck in that mental state, if that makes sense. I'm not stuck in that limited belief of, like, wow, I was assaulted and my life was destroyed by my career was destroyed. I mean, I had 10 years in 10 years, and I planned on retiring. And that still is hard for me sometimes, because I look and I'm like, I absolutely loved being a firefighter. I loved who I was and what I did, and putting on that uniform and representing our country and representing, being a member of the United States Air Force. And I was proud of that. But they can't take away the service that I did, and the awards that I achieved, and the work and the people that I met, and the leaders that I had that helped influence me. I mean, I don't know where I would be without those people too, because it's not just about me. Like, the people that recognized my strengths, and when I hadn't been able to see it in myself at that time, especially on that deployment, those guys were detrimental to me, pushing through that next hard stuff. They saw me at my worst, but they still, believed in me and were able to push me to be the best that I knew that I could be, and that I didn't see that in myself at that time, because I was just totally living, obviously, through the middle of my assault. And that's hard, because that's hard to reflect back and be like, wow, that is not even close to the person that I truly am. But I also, it's like, okay, but I was so unhealed. I mean, I was going through one of the most traumatic situations in my life, and I've brought that up a couple times to people, and they're like, you don't have any reason to apologize. We support you. And that's also what it stinks that I had such a phenomenal leadership. Like, why can't I have had them back home, as opposed to downrange, right? Like, had I had that kind of leadership at home, we wouldn't even be here discussing this right now. I would probably still be sharing my story, but I would still be serving. So that part's been hard. There are times where it does kind of hit me, and I'm like, wow, I missed that. But I wouldn't be able to have the freedom that I have now, and be able to go and to speak, the way that I like, to set up doing what I'm doing right now, podcast interviews and going. I'm working on my first solo book this year to share my story, to write like truly in depth of what happened, because I know that I've kind of avoided it. And I'm like, because it's like the details and really getting down and putting it on paper, but it's important and people need to hear it, and that's for me, even if I just impact one person, that's all that matters, like knowing that they matter and that if they can't stand up for themselves, I'm that voice.
Well, I'm so glad you shared this story and are continuing to share this story.
Thank
Uh,
you.
so, for, victims and survivors and, for people who want you to share your story, how can someone reach out to you and find you?
I'm all over social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I've got my website, my Meghann Trap Coaching. I'm on LinkedIn. I mean, I'm everywhere. So, and I respond to pretty much everybody through DMs or emails or so. Yeah, any of those social media platforms on my website, I will gladly get back to you and would love to hear from anybody and everybody or see how I can help in that community, whether it's like I said, domestic violence or, sexual assault or mental health. I mean, any of those things really, yeah. Just feel free to reach out to me.
Good. So I will definitely put those in the show notes as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
But honestly, Meghann, thank you so much for, being open and being transparent because, like I said before, you're a very strong person and sharing this story, and making sure those, pieces of shit kind of like get highlighted and people recognize that they need to advocate for themselves and the
Yeah.
importance for that. It truly is inspiring. So thank you so much for, being on this podcast. Like I said, I'll tag everything in the show notes so people can reach out to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I mean, yeah, to caveat on the end, oh, I hate caveat. I don't know why I said that. Like my military is still ingrained in me now. But no, when you said about them, like I truly still feel that there's still a lot that's going to be coming out. Like it's going to come more even into light that maybe they may not be held accountable in the way that I truly like justice wise, like in a court of law. But I feel like we all know the truth comes out eventually, right? Like
Mhm.
regardless of how it comes out. Like these people it's going to happen. They're going to be recognized for what they did because a lot of them are still serving. That's the disturbing part. And I'm like, it's just for me, I'm like, because of the goals that I have. And again, that's why I share this because it is. And the more that this gets out there, like, it's not like, oh, yeah, my goal is to just, get them. But it's just a matter of time before that stuff happens, before it comes out, before somebody starts going, So
Yeah.
again, it takes a lot. People don't want to. I get it. I empathize with them. I'm here for you. If anyone's listening to this and they don't think they can take that on, I get it. It's very intimidating, but there are so many people out there in the community. I've met so many amazing survivors and advocates of people, especially through LinkedIn lately, that are really doing everything that they can to support, those of us or anyone that's been through a traumatic situation. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm so honored and blessed that you had me on and however I can help, let me know.
Yeah, and same. Like I said, thank you so much for, sharing your story because hopefully this inspires, more again victims and survivors to speak out and hopefully we can make a change, which is the whole reason why I wanted to start this podcast is because there are
Yeah,
things that still need to, you know, we've come far, but there's still work
we
that
still
needs to
want,
be done.
yeah, there's still a long ways to go.
Well, thank you everyone for listening to this episode. Like I said, please reach out to Meghann. She's a very strong, badass woman. So she's definitely a person to keep in contact with. Again, thank you guys so much for listening. Until next week, we will talk to you soon.